this image, kind of portrays what I'm feeling as a business owner, as an individual. You are that person in that lifeboat, in that Bitcoin life raft, and that's the fiat financial system sinking with behind us. So Bitcoin itself, so you get an idea with what money is on this personal journey, understanding money, and then Bitcoin, you come to realize it is a solution. And effectively, Bitcoin, for me, and what I think of Bitcoin, is open, honest, neutral money. And two key concepts with Bitcoin: it's totally decentralized and totally secure. And this was something I was glossing over when I was learning about Bitcoin, but these are the two most important things about Bitcoin, I feel, because the current financial system, it's a centralized system. It's controlled by a small group of people, central banks, government organizations, things like that. And that system requires inflation to survive. It's basically all built on debt. It's basically a debt-based Ponzi scheme. If inflation doesn't occur in that system, it will collapse. And all these people that are holding their wealth in that system will effectively lose that wealth. So when you have Bitcoin as an alternative solution, it's a fixed and finite supply, so they can't inflate it. Nobody can control it. There's no trust required in the system. It's backed by energy. It's backed by maths, the laws of physics. It's effectively backed by nature. And I think that's essential for money. If you think of gold as well, it's a natural element from the soil, from the ground. Bitcoin is a natural element, effectively, in cyberspace. So it allows free markets to function. And I think that's another misconception we have at the moment. We think we operate in free markets, but the actual centralized financial system doesn't allow free markets. The markets are distorted. Bitcoin, because it's neutral money, because it's decentralized and secure, it allows productivity gains that come from advances in technology to flow back to society, as opposed to flowing back up to the top of the fiat system. And this effectively brings deflation. So everything should be getting cheaper for everybody, as opposed to things getting more expensive. And this is a concept I learned from a man called Jeff Booth, who wrote the book called The Price of Tomorrow. And it's a very, very good book to read. And he's got an article called, I can't remember the name of the article, I think it's Finding Signal in a Noisy World. I would highly recommend anybody to read that article about 10 times before you actually get a grasp of it, but it's very important. So then if you start pricing your world in Bitcoin, well, look at the average house price. Real estate is one of the key investment vehicles for anybody on the globe. For anybody who's wealthy, they all own property, they all invest in real estate. But if you look at 2016, the price of an average house costs around 70 Bitcoin. If you look at today, 2024, that same house will cost you around about 4 Bitcoin. Now that's a massive shift. And if you project that out in the future, you're talking half a Bitcoin, projected out probably 0.1 Bitcoin at some time, not in the too distant future. So it's important, if you start pricing your world in Bitcoin, everything gets cheaper in your world. So it's a kind of an important concept to kind of think about. And so marrying that all together, well, why would I accept Bitcoin in my business? Well, it's a logical next step for me. It's a natural extension of what I was learning in my knowledge base. And Bitcoin for me is the answer and the solution to many things in the world, not just your finances, but not just accepting payments, accepting Bitcoin payments in the business, because that's the easy way to get started with Bitcoin in your business. Just simply start accepting them, but also the need to drive adoption and increase awareness on the ground. As I'll show you in a few slides, Bitcoin adoption within merchants locally is quite small in Ireland, but being a business owner in a local community, you have kind of a customer base, you've got a sense of trust within your community, so you can add a lot of value to that community in either accepting Bitcoin or even promoting and talking about Bitcoin in your business. So as I said, I opened my opticians in 2007, started accepting Bitcoin in 2022. I put a tweet out on Twitter, or X as it's called now, and I don't use my Twitter for my opticians because there's no real marketing point for that in my local area. But immediately I got so much support from other Bitcoiners, a lot of people liking the post, commenting on the post. Somebody from Australia wanted to come and get their eyes tested. I said, well, if you want to come to Newton Stewart, you can pay for the flights. I'll put you up for a night, but that's it. But I think the support of the community is one of the key things. Bitcoiners are some of the most intelligent, some of the most open, and some of the most kind-hearted people that I've met on my journey. And it's important to realize that the community support from Bitcoiners for other Bitcoiners is there. It's a whole big network, a whole big community, and the network effect is growing rapidly across the globe. So in order to get set up, the more practical point of getting set up is just accepting Bitcoin in your business. I know John's here from Zaprite after me, he'll talk a lot more about that. But in general, I use a company called Coin Corner. They're based out of the Isle of Man. Now, they are KYC, you have to go through all the process, but being a company I don't mind that, it's absolutely fine. So they set up everything in their back end, and it's simply scanning QR codes, generating invoices on their app, and somebody can come and scan a QR code from any of the wallets that are available. Another option is Wallet of Satoshi, which I also use, and you can literally get that set up for any business within 2 minutes effectively, you can get set up. So for small merchants, kind of farmers markets, people selling things, products, etc., that would be a good option for them. So it's easy to get set up, it's very, very simple. And incentives to do that too. There's other ways around kind of marketing your business with Bitcoin. And it's not just standing up and telling everybody that comes in, oh, I accept Bitcoin, let's talk about Bitcoin, because you can't force it on people. But Coin Corner have an NFC card called the Bulk Card, which is just basically a little credit card or a little card. I think I have one here. Where is it? Yeah, it's not there. So it's just a little card like that. So you can actually upload sats onto those cards. So I started this year using that as like gift vouchers for my patients, running competitions, and that forces them to come back and spend sats with me and the opticians, gives them a bit of awareness of what Bitcoin is and gets them interested from that kind of touch point. And you can also offer cash or incentives like discount, pay in Bitcoin, you get 20% discount or 10% cash back. So there's different creative options you can use as a business. Now, the benefits of accepting Bitcoin, one of the main ones is the Bitcoin brand. The key thing with this too, as a business, this brand is open source. You don't need a license, you don't need to pay money to use the brand. Literally any business can take the brand, pop it on their products and goods, and sell it to the customers. And again, if you're trying to market to more of a Bitcoin niche, which is growing exponentially, then your business has positioned itself quite well to actually tie in with Bitcoin and use that as a benefit for the business. Additional benefits are, as I've mentioned, really individuals that understand Bitcoin. They're highly motivated to search for and support other businesses that accept Bitcoin. And yes, you may be accepting Bitcoin, but in a way, by doing that and by standing out and saying, I accept Bitcoin payments, you're actually saying you accept Bitcoiners, and that means a lot. That means a lot to people within the community, and they're very highly motivated and loyal to support businesses. You get immediate final settlement with payments. Again, this will be talked about in other presentations in more detail, but you can accept payments 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's immediately finalized and settled in your wallet. You own that money. That's money you own, money you can spend, money that's yours. And another thing is international payments. Like you can send money anywhere on this globe at the speed of light for the cost of a fraction of a cup of coffee, effectively. In fact, you could probably move €1 billion of wealth or worth from here to Tokyo, have it settled in half an hour, and pay the cost of 2 cups of coffee for that. Now, it's a crazy thing. And it's a major benefit for global business networks and global businesses. Again, there's no chargebacks from this. This can be a bit of a pain for many businesses where you've already processed orders and all of a sudden the card payment processor is refunded the customer, and it causes a little bit of a headache. That can't happen with Bitcoin over the Lightning Network. And the Lightning Network is the main network. That's the layer 2 on top of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin's the base layer protocol. It's a layer 1. And the Lightning Network allows for micropayments and payments at nearly zero cost fees, effectively, depending on who you use. So you'd be paying like a minuscule fee for a transaction versus like Visa, MasterCard, Stripe. All these companies take at least 2.5–3% fees from you. So if you're doing a large volume of trade, this can give a massive saving to your bottom line. And then one of the other major things is Bitcoin in your balance sheet. If you have cash in your business and you hold it on your balance sheet, you're losing money, you're losing the value, it's losing its purchasing power over time. You can simply take that Bitcoin, and it's something I've done in my business this year for the first time. You have to work with accountants, there's tax things that you have to look through, but that's too much depth to go into now. But it's something, I'm sure a lot of you know Peter McCormick from Real Bedford. I see a shirt somewhere in the audience earlier on today. But he got an investment with the Winklevoss twins, or the Winklevi, whatever you want to call them, of 3.6 million. I had to correct BBC Look East because they said cryptocurrency, so I obviously told them Bitcoin, not crypto. But they said the statement they issued was quite insightful when they actually announced this. It says, through Bitcoin or Bitcoin investments, Real Bedford, or insert your business name here, Real Bedford's balance sheet will be fortified with the hardest money in the observable universe, which is a big claim, big statement. It basically means it will serve as a blueprint for how small businesses and underdogs everywhere can create a bedrock for financial stability and supercharge their mission. So as governments around the world continue to inflate their currencies, businesses powered by Bitcoin will only grow stronger. And that kind of clarifies it well. That's what Bitcoin on your balance sheet does for your business, which is really important to know and be aware of. Now, you have to touch on a few drawbacks here too. Now, the individual's perception, as we know, if you ever try talking to your friends or family about Bitcoin, there's a lot of times they will roll their eyes, they'll just walk away from you, they don't want to engage with you, and they think you're absolutely crazy. I've had that constantly in my experience, in my family, with my friends. But it's the individual's perception of Bitcoin. It's where they get their information from. Unfortunately, a lot of people get their information from mainstream media, which, as we know, is generally totally false, and especially around Bitcoin. So that can be maybe a bit of an issue with your business if you're standing up and shouting about Bitcoin in your business. For me as an optician, I can't really do that. You potentially have to be a little bit more subtle and just having a few signs up here and there, just have a few touch points. So that's something to be aware of as a business. And also expect very few local payments at present, because I've been in touch with a few business owners from this map in just this week over looking at the BTC map, which identifies merchants in Ireland and across the globe who accept Bitcoin. But there are only 25 businesses currently on that map registered that are accepting Bitcoin, both on chain and on Lightning. So that's a tiny amount compared to the kind of scale of Ireland. And I got a few comments back. I asked the question, like, what is your motivation to accept Bitcoin, and what kind of feedback have you had? And effectively, traction is slow. It's not just a couple of comments. It's not a common form of payment in our industry at present. Bitcoin is not used by the customers at the moment. Accepting Bitcoin has gained us more attention. However, we have only had a handful of payments. So from a payments point of view, it's actually quite slow in the uptake, but that's understandable. It takes time. If you look at the adoption curve of any money, any new monetary good coming into existence, it'll go through different phases in its lifespan. It starts off as a collectible, transfers to store of value, which is the phase that we're at the moment, and then it becomes a medium of exchange, and then ultimately a unit of account, which is the de facto currency on the global scale. And just by businesses accepting Bitcoin, we're sort of speeding up that medium of exchange concept. So it's kind of increasing the time scale to bring that down from the general organic growth. But it is early. It's very, very early at the moment, and these things do take time. But I do feel in time, people and businesses will be using Bitcoin payment rails without even realizing. Bitcoin itself is a base layer protocol for money. Protocols don't come along very long. If you look at the internet, the HTTP protocol, email, the SMTP protocol, these are all protocols that allow email and internet to operate. Not many people know how it works, but everybody uses them. And I think the same thing will happen with Bitcoin. So all these businesses and brands, that are using Bitcoin currently, that are on the map within Ireland, we're still very early, but we've taken that initiative to actually step forward, learn about finance, learn about Bitcoin, marry the two concepts together, and the world becomes a whole new place for you. And it's more than just payments. Bitcoin's more than that. It is a community. It's proof of work. The actual protocol, the way the network works, requires proof of work. But as an individual and a business owner, you're required to put in the work to understand it. You create more customer awareness. You connect with other business owners. I wouldn't have been reaching out to these businesses this week if it wasn't for Bitcoin. I've made new connections, and you could create new opportunities out of that from a business point of view as well. And we all create value as businesses, and that is what Bitcoin instills. You attract your ideal customers, and Bitcoin for me, they are my ideal customers moving forward with the change in this financial system from what's currently a broken fiat system into a neutralized money system that's for everybody, that brings inclusion for everybody. You need to provide value if you want to stay in business. Business owners effectively want to educate who understand Bitcoin and who want to tell people about it, and you create a lot of impact. And in just finishing off, it's one of the things that Bitcoin's done for me in my business. In order to create impact, I've started a new eyewear range called Huddle Eyewear. It's very early stages, but we're getting it online. Ideally, I'm going to be targeting that to the Bitcoin community as well. But I also started up an initiative called Sats for Sight. And it's shocking to see that there's 2 billion people globally who can't get access to eye care services. And I think there's 1.3 billion who simply need a pair of prescription glasses in order to completely transform their lives. So I've set it up like a kind of a trust fund or a growth fund for Bitcoin. So any sales I make, I'm going to give a percentage into the actual Sats for Sight initiative, and hopefully partner with other Bitcoin charities that work within the global south. There's Motive in Peru that I've been in contact with, who set up circular economies for the poorest societies that I've seen, and the people that are in need. So Bitcoin makes you want to help, wants you to make the world a better place. And Bitcoin by itself will do that, but as businesses, we have the opportunity to do that also. And I'll just quickly mention, I started my podcast recently. I've only interviewed a couple of business owners, but if anybody wants to check that out, feel free. It's at satsforthat.com. It's hard to say actually, but that's it for me for now. I hope time's okay. And if there's any questions, feel free.
Hello. If anybody wants to ask a few questions, we've got about 10 minutes for questions. Do you want to put up your hand there? Anybody wants to ask any questions to Alan? Yeah, over here. Hang on a sec.
Well, I just want to know where you're based.
Where I'm based? Sorry, it's
where are you?
I'm based in Newton Stewart, which is between Oma and Strabane in the north, and up towards Derry direction. So it's a bit of a trek from Dublin.
There's another question there in the middle. Yeah. Do you want to stand up?
Is there a list or a directory of businesses that use Bitcoin?
Yeah, well, it's btcmap.org. So it's btcmap.org. If you go to that has it brings you up the map. You can see all the different locations of these businesses across the globe. It's actually, when you look, there's different circular economies like Lugano in Switzerland. Obviously El Salvador, like it's got a massive Bitcoin legal tender law, but there's lots of circular kind of towns, cities, setting up communities, which is good to see it. And it's something I'd really like to do in Ireland. In my local area especially, I've been talking to traders about Bitcoin, and a lot of them have been interested, but it's breaking that barrier. It's trying to find people where they're at and breaking that out. But check, btcmap.org.
Yeah, another question here.
Just in relation to your uptake on using SAT and Bitcoin, well, you said it was slow for the uptake. What about the interest in it? Has the interest been good? Or has it been slower?
The interest, funny, it's only been in the last 6 months where I've actually started speaking out about Bitcoin. I think that slide I said about the drawbacks, it's like customers' perception. I was always scared of talking about it locally. So I set up a little presentation for local traders, and they were quite interested. And I've had endless conversations now with customers because I've got signs up. Simply putting a sign up saying, I've got one saying Bitcoin preferred here, and that kind of gets them a little bit intrigued. It's like, well, why do you prefer Bitcoin? And then we just start talking. It takes a lot longer to test people's eyes, however, but from a business point of view, maybe it's not the best thing, but it's good. You know, if you want to grow in adoption and increase growth, it's important to talk to people about it. Yeah.
Anybody else there for any questions? Just put up your hands. There's a mic on the other side there. Anybody else? Don't be shy. Come on.
Okay.
There you go.
What about tax?
Tax? Yeah, it depends. Again, if you would need to get, I suppose, I'm not the best person advising that. In fact,
We have somebody talking about that today as well.
Yeah, well, that's true. There's a talk, but you can spend and replace Bitcoin. Coin Corner is quite good in that. If somebody pays you in Bitcoin, that can be immediately transferred into fiat, into euros or sterling or whatever, and then that transfers straight into your bank account. So that, I don't think that causes a taxable event as such. Yes, if you're accepting Bitcoin and you go and that appreciates in price, then you spend it, or you buy a product with it, then you've got a taxable event that way. But yeah, I wouldn't be the best person to go into detail on that. It's above my pay grade.
There's another question there. Okay.
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Sorry, what's SAT?
Sorry, SATs. So SATs, one Bitcoin has 100 million other units called Satoshis. So SATs, yeah, SATs are short for Satoshis. So sorry, I should have clarified. Okay.
Have you ever used your stats to pay anything?
Yeah, I have. I've bought, mostly within Bitcoin communities, I've bought different cards, products, t-shirts, a couple of books as well, using SATs. So very easy to do. I've had 3 people pay me in SATs, only 3. Mostly family members. So very forced. I said, you got to come and pay me on SATs. So yeah, or Satoshis.
I think people are just reluctant to spend it because they don't value over time.
Yeah.
Most people still look at it as an investment.
Yeah, I think the medium of exchange, once that gets to that stage, once the laws are passed and everything's kind of more open, then that's when, yeah, it's when the unit of account comes. I think that's the key. Yeah.
Hi there. My question is, how did your accountant take it when you said you were going to accept Bitcoin? Did you have to change accountant, or did they have to do a big learning curve?
No, they had to go down a rabbit hole. It was my receptionist. The receptionist's daughter was an accountant's assistant, and I was talking to her about it. So she mentioned, and he was actually interested in Bitcoin anyway. But I just had a long conversation with him, and it's not that difficult to do. You know, putting it on your balance sheet, you know, sounds like, well, how do you do that? It's just holding Bitcoin, and you know, holding Bitcoin in a cold storage wallet, ideally a multi-sig wallet, and that's effectively it. But yeah, knowledge is key. You know, accountants need to know what they're doing, obviously. So ideally, a Bitcoin savvy accountant's probably a good idea.
Don't worry. We have them in Ireland already, so.
Hi, with regards to your charitable initiative, do you know any UK charities that are benefiting from Bitcoin at the moment or engaging with it?
I do, and I might not know. I think they're called Clearwater or Cleanwater. I can't remember the name. I was at a conference 2 years ago in Edinburgh. It was the UK Bitcoin conference, and I've got a charity water. They're called potentially. So I think her name's Hannah Bellamy. Is not the CEO, one of the people in charge there. So they set up a Bitcoin growth fund. They actually got I think it was a 25 Bitcoin investment, 50 Bitcoin investment from, again, the Winklevoss twins. And they matched that, and then Peter McCormick as well. There's other donors for that, but they have a Bitcoin growth fund, so they hold Bitcoin. They're holding it to 2025, and then they're going to spend that, and they set up wells in the global south, effectively. Yeah.
It's more of a curiosity. Did you, as you said, Bitcoin is seen as a store of value. Did you ever have someone that was that you had a conversation and you knew that they had Bitcoin but decided to pay in fiat?
Yeah. Well, again, mostly family members and friends. At that point in time, I didn't have Bitcoin payment rails working, and this would have been 2018, 2019. And a couple of friends involved with Bitcoin. But again, it's that thing, as I said, even if somebody wants to come now and pay in fiat currency, just pay in normal money, but they're into Bitcoin, the fact that they're getting that adoption, you're getting that conversation going, I think that's important at this stage in the journey. You know, it could be a decade, it could be 2 or 3 decades before this really kicks in as a medium of exchange properly. So it's just really about education, growth, and adoption at this point. But yeah, it's happened. Yeah.
Just with the volatility and the price of Bitcoin, how do you can price your product?
How do you price your? Well, the product's still priced in fiat currency, so it's priced in euros, priced in pounds. That will automatically convert into the market value of Bitcoin. So at the point of transaction, it'll be entered in with Coin Corner. It'll be entered in as the sterling or the euro value, and then it will convert into sats. So it'll just keep a track of it. So everybody's still measuring the price in fiat terms. Like if you ask somebody about Bitcoin, they'll say, well, Bitcoin's $70,000. But you know, one Bitcoin's one Bitcoin. Once the world starts pricing everything in Bitcoin, things become a bit more interesting.
Sorry, just with regards to trying to get fiat currency into the likes of crypto or whatever, the challenges we would face is with the banks stopping us. What sort of solutions
Well,
do you come across?
I've had personal issues with my personal bank accounts. Business bank accounts, I haven't. Obviously, slightly different. I'm from up in the north. My business bank Santander. I send fiat into Coin Corner, the exchange, all the time without an issue. I also use Kraken as well. There's different exchanges. I've never had an issue. Funny, I know they put limits. I think it's €3,000 or £3,000 limits on personal, but again, I haven't had any issues. For some
They literally will bring you up and tell you that this is a fraudulent transaction, and they really do their best to stop you buying crypto. Is my experience anyway.
I've had that a few years ago. Like a couple of my banks, I just left because the questions and they're afraid. They are.
Even though they're going to do their own central bank digital currency, they actually, it's amazing, and we're very clear on what the banks are doing versus cryptocurrency.
It threatens their existence, so they're going to put a barrier up in some way, shape, or form. But it can't be stopped. Bitcoin simply can't be stopped now. It's gone too long, and they just can't. So, not worried.
Thanks very much.
Good day, Alan. Nice to meet you. Yeah. So my question.
Didn't see.
I appreciate your speech and would like to ask you a question about, like everybody was asking about tax and things, but what do you think like MiCA regulations would like make it more simplified, What I mean, like,
so when,
upcoming thing that I'm asking, yeah? Thank you.
Sorry, when will regulations be more kind of simplified? Is that what you're...
MiCA regulations about like next year. What would you say about it? Like
What regulations is that? Sorry,
micro
sorry.
micro regulations, upcoming regulations for this 2025 year.
Micro regulations? MiCA regulations? Sorry, I couldn't hear.
European regulations.
Oh, the European regulations. Again, I wouldn't be the person to talk about that. Sorry. Based, again, because I'm up in the north, I don't really have to deal with that so much down here. But I think that there's other experts would be more in tune to talk. Again, I would have no experience regarding that, so I'm not sure on the state of play with that. So, sorry, I can't help in that respect.
Don't worry, there's loads of speakers coming, and there's another 12, 15 speakers coming, so we have loads of different topics covered. So, Alan, thank you for your presentation. And just quickly, I'm going to have Roger here come up for a second. He's doing a workshop outside. If anybody wants to join, a little chocolate workshop, making a little Bitcoin thing. So, come on up, Roger.
How you doing, everyone? 11 o'clock over here, we're going to be doing a Bitcoin chocolate making workshop. It's a little bit different. Bitcoin is money. Bitcoin is also a very cultural thing. And it affects us all. Money touches everything. And at the end of the day, Bitcoin is a mirror that makes you reflect on yourself and how you want to approach life. And health is one of those big things that we all look into as Bitcoiners initially. I do a Bitcoin chocolate making workshop, which is sugar-free. I believe sugar is kind of a bit like fiat. It's basically cheap to make, it's quick to make, it's easy to make, and it's addictive. And it's rotting our bodies from the inside, and it's a very terrible thing. So this is a Bitcoin chocolate making workshop. It's sugar-free, it's healthy, raw cacao. It's for you all out there. First 6 people get a free chocolate Bitcoin. See you at 11. That's pretty soon. Thank you.
Thank you. So go out there and try some chocolate from Roger and make your own chocolate out there. Next we have John from Zaprite. He's going to go in and he's going to start talking about accepting payments through Zaprite and how businesses can take payments and pay in fiat, Bitcoin or Lightning. Yeah, thank you. Okay, let's go.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thanks for putting on this amazing conference. I was here last year, and I think there's a bigger crowd this year, which is amazing to see. So thank you to everybody for coming out and listening to the speakers here today. I wanted to talk about Bitcoin payments. I think this is one of the things that is really coming to the fore right now. Where Bitcoin has traditionally been seen as this amazing store of value. It's the HODL meme has lasted for like over a decade. It's great. It's gotten Bitcoin to where it is right now, but there's a lot more people interested in the payment side of it because of the inherent risks that are built into the fiat system, which we'll go through shortly. First, I want to start with a bit of a background and origin story of Zaprite and how it came about. So I'm a graphic designer by trade. I studied graphic design, then went into UI UX, and I was living in Canada for 12 years. I'm interested in Bitcoin for a long time, but never really knew kind of how I could get into it and get involved because I wasn't a developer and couldn't read the code and do reviews and stuff. But I was using an exchange in Canada, Bull Bitcoin Exchange, to buy my Bitcoin, and their app was design-wise, it was just terrible. And so I knew some of the guys there, and so I spent the weekend basically just redesigning the whole thing, just doing a complete revamp of all the UI UX. And I sent it over to Francis, the CEO, and I said, look, long-time customer, love your product, but your design's terrible, needs a lot of work, here's something better. And luckily I got hired. And from that moment then I needed to get paid in Bitcoin. And how I was going to do that was a problem because there really wasn't software there to to automate a lot of the things that needed to be automated. You don't want to be, pasting a Bitcoin address at the bottom of an invoice, and maybe in 60 days or 30 days they go to pay you, and you have to have an email exchange or conversation about the price. Is this rate okay? Pay me now. Is this address still good? So I basically wanted to abstract away a lot of that and build something that I needed for myself. But with a key aspect of it was always going to be self-custody, because Bitcoin doesn't work unless it's self-custody. And that was really a core part of Zaprite product, was to build something where I could connect any wallet, something that I'm already using. I didn't want to have to go KYC with another provider or like provide something else. I wanted to plug in exactly the tools that I was already using and use those to accept the Bitcoin that I was earning. And again, having all the notifications and everything abstracted away so I didn't have to deal with that. And keeping full records for accounting and tax and stuff. I know there's speakers here that talk about this stuff today, and it is important, especially if you're running a business. You need to know how your business is performing. So having all these records on hand is obviously critical. Bitcoin payments as a necessity. I mean, we're starting to see a lot of things happening today that are just pointing everybody in the direction of Bitcoin. We had Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, a lot of these big banks in the US go under last year, which caused a lot of traditional Bitcoin companies and fintech companies to go through a lot of pain for a few days, wondering how they're going to pay employees and things like that. We're seeing it happen right now with Synapse and Evolve, like literally like today or yesterday got announced there's more banks going under, hundreds of millions of dollars frozen. These are things that businesses are dealing with on a more and more regular basis, especially as the regulation starts to build ever more kind of restrictive choke points and regulation around how people can get paid, not just in Bitcoin, but in traditional fiat space as well. Things are getting very, very restrictive in what you can and can't do. And if you believe in Bitcoin, you kind of know this is an inevitability that at some point you're going to have to accept Bitcoin payments. So what we're trying to do is trying to get people set up with those payment rails before hyper-Bitcoinization happens and before they actually need those payment rails. Because the last thing you want to be doing is scrambling to take Bitcoin payments when your bank is being shut down. That's really not where you want to be, so you want to be ahead of the game. So why Bitcoin and fiat as well? Because we do live in this world today where we have most people running on a fiat standard, whether it's euros or dollars or whatever. You still have a lot of your expenses, your accounting and everything denominated in fiat, so you have to be able to accept both. But obviously the benefits of Bitcoin, most people in this room probably know these today, so I won't spend too much time on these, but ease of final settlement. Also, it's the most efficient way to acquire Bitcoin is a direct connection to your customers. If you understand Bitcoin and you've already understood the store of value aspect of it, you get that it is the most pristine collateral. Your next logical conclusion is, I need that on my balance sheet, I need that on my treasury. And the best way to do that is accept it directly from your customers. You don't want to be relying on a single exchange as your choke point to be buying your Bitcoin. You're going to pay fees, you're going to risk custody issues, all that type of stuff. You want to be able to spread out those opportunities and have multiple channels to be able to get that Bitcoin in. And again, it's just a redundancy in payment rail. As I said, we're seeing a lot of banks shutting down, a lot of people not being able to, meet payments and things like that. Holds, chargebacks, rising costs. We see Stripe, different credit card companies now raising their prices. I think they're, in the US at least anyway, they're over 3% now. And that's just going to keep happening because of the costs associated with running those types of businesses. They just continue to rise in an inflationary environment. So those businesses are always going to have to keep raising their percentages on those payments. And then I mentioned the regulation and choke points. And one of the things that we see regularly is that businesses, you're always told to have a rainy day fund for, whatever it is you need to do, whether that's a personal life budget or even in businesses to be able to, pay salaries for a few months if things don't work out the way they're supposed to. It's now almost a necessity to have that 2 or 3 months emergency runway in Bitcoin if you're a business, because you cannot rely on banks and fiat payment providers to be there in the morning. And that's just the reality of the situation that we live in now. We're seeing it on an almost weekly basis where a lot of these providers are just collapsing and leaving people high and dry. And so that's what we do is we recognize these dual rails. People still need to accept fiat. but we want to build a unified payment experience where they can accept Bitcoin and fiat side by side, and build in all the incentives that they can use to actually incentivize their customers to pay in Bitcoin, whether that's offering a discount on the Bitcoin side of it or putting a premium on the fiat side of it. You want to put your preference in front of your customers and say, I'll reward you if you reward me giving me the preferred payment method that I want. And again, just doing all of this in one integrated checkout is really what we do, because most of the time what we see now is people will have, pay me in fiat, here's a button to go over to my Stripe hosted checkout form and pay credit card, here's a button to go over to like a Bitcoin payment provider. So we want to unify that in one experience, because it really is a two-sided transaction. You have to provide the best possible experience for the payer and the customer side of it, as well as the merchant. Even though we are heavily focused on the merchant side, the consumer customer side of it is hugely important as well. And so, we call ourselves a payment gateway. We're not a payment processor. We don't touch Bitcoin at all, or fiat. That's one of really the key things that I wanted to focus on when building Zaprite, was we never ever wanted to touch money. We didn't want to have to deal with regulatory bodies. We didn't want to have to get money transmitter licenses. We didn't have to register in every country we wanted to operate in. Plus, I'm just a huge advocate of self-custody anyway. As I said before, Bitcoin doesn't work unless you can self-custody it. And so really that's at the core of what we do. So we allow you to plug in any wallet. Now that may be a custodial wallet provider if that's your preferred choice, but we also offer you the non-custodial route as well. So for example, any Bitcoin wallet can be plugged into Zaprite by just putting an Xpub. So that could be an Xpub from a Trezor, a Ledger, Cold Card, whatever it might be, or a software wallet like Wasabi running on a laptop. We also allow you to plug in your Lightning node. So if you're running a Lightning node either on an Umbrel or a Start9, or maybe you're running on Voltage, chances are you're running LAD or Core Lightning, one of the variations. So we allow you to put those credentials into Zaprite as well. And so when your customers are landing on your checkout and they're going to pay for something for, in this case, €21, we can basically ping your node in read-only mode and request an invoice and say, hey, give us a Lightning invoice for €21. We then present that to the customer, they pay it, and that money just gets shipped directly to your node. We don't touch it at all. So we're basically just the piping to get the money between your customer and you as directly as possible. And we basically just provide all of the hosted services to be able to do that. So you can kind of think of Zaprite as, if any of you are familiar with BTC Pay Server, on one side, it's a self-hosted, absolutely amazing technology, really great software. The folks building that are doing some absolutely amazing things. If you haven't watched the documentary that just went up on YouTube, I think yesterday, My Trust in You is Broken, I think it's called, go watch that. It's a really great story of BTC Pay Server. But you got to be technical, you got to know how to run a server, you got to know how to set that up, you got to manage liquidity on your Lightning channels, you got to do all that stuff. On the other end of the scale, you might have OpenNode or BitPay, somebody that's going to host all that for you, but they're full KYC, full custodial, they charge percentages in and out on the money. Zaprite sits in that sweet spot where we abstract away running the server, so you don't have to do any of that, but we give you the full benefits of self-custody. So we host the checkout for you, we run the server, you don't have to do any of that, but you get all of the benefits of both sides. So again, any wallet, anyone, anywhere, and that's really kind of what I hit on there in the last slide, is that we really want to meet you where you are. We're not going to force you to onboard with a new wallet or KYC with a new provider. You come to us with whatever tool it is, whatever wallet you're already using, whether it's a mobile wallet, a software wallet on a computer, or a hardware wallet, or even a custodian somewhere like maybe Unchained or something like that, or you want to go with something like Stripe for like the Lightning liquidity. We're really just building out integrations for all of these partners. So you can come to us like knowing that you're going to be able to plug in something that allows you to get up and running very, very quickly on the current setup that you have. You're not going to have to learn how to use a new service or create a new wallet. You can just plug your Xpub straight in and good to go. And of course we do the Bitcoin and fiat side by side, because as I mentioned, the fiat, unfortunately, it is still a massive part of people's businesses these days. There's a small percentage of people that are willing to accept Bitcoin, and even a smaller percentage of their customers that are basically going to pay in Bitcoin. So we have to provide those dual rails and incentivize people to make those payments. And the tools that we do that through are invoicing, payment links, e-commerce connections like WooCommerce, Shopify, things like that. And then we're also building out subscriptions and point of sale as well. We recently released an API and webhook service, so now any developer can basically use Zaprite to build a custom payment flow from their website through to our checkouts and back to their website. And that's all available now through the API and webhook service. We're going to start adding in more accounting tools like QuickBooks and Sage, NetSuite, Xero, things like that. And we're building out sales reporting and dashboards, regularly adding things on that side of it as well. And we have full CSV download for all your transaction history and everything, so you can plug that into any accounting software, give it to your accountant, and they'll be able to get you what you need from that. So all data is in there, and that from timestamps like Bitcoin exchange rates at the time the payment was taken in, cost basis, all that type of stuff. And then Teams features, obviously, you just want to be able to invite people in, whether it's an accountant with a read-only view to be able to download that CSV, or other members of your team. I mentioned before, we're not a payment processor. We basically work in conjunction with whatever you got. We're an enhancement that sits on top of your existing wallet, whatever that might be. We want to specialize in the payment experience. That's really what we're all about. We started doing different things about trying to figure out the accounting side of it, expense tracking, that type of stuff. But when you try to spread yourself out too much, you end up kind of diluting your ability to provide a really professional service, the best you can do. And so that's really why we decided to hone in and focus on the payment side of it, because we really feel that now is the time. We're seeing a lot of people come to us and onboard and want to onboard, knowing full well that they may never get a Bitcoin payment for 6 months or a year or more. They just want to have that rail in place because they see what's happening around them and they want to be set up and ready to go. And that's vastly different to what Bitcoin was even 2 or 3 years ago. When I moved to Austin after I left Canada to start this business, very much what we were all doing and all the Bitcoin companies at the time is we were trying to go around to bars and coffee shops and get them to accept Bitcoin. And they invariably would because they were excited about the footfall they might get for a new event or something. But what usually happens is that people disappear after the event's over, the payments don't happen, and they get disillusioned, and that's that. And it was very hard to sell. But what we're seeing now is we're seeing a lot of people just come to us and say, no, look, I get it. I understand the store of value. I want this on my balance sheet. I want this on my treasury. And payments is the best way to do that directly from my customers. And so they're getting those payment rails in place before they need them, which is really the critical part of it. And so, what does that look like if you're a business running on Zaprite? The left-hand side here, you might see, somebody selling a ticket for an event, right? Imagine you're running an event. You can set up a payment link and you can sell the tickets for your event. So that's like a one-to-many sale. You can just sell this ticket over and over again. In the middle, you might have an invoice, which is just a traditional billing that you might do for maybe sponsors, right? You're sending out invoices to your sponsors to get paid. You use the invoicing. And then the right-hand side of it is what a checkout would look like if you hooked up like a WooCommerce or something like that to your selling t-shirts or hats or things like that. And as you can see, this is all kind of branded with our fictitious Bitcoin events company, but you can fully brand this, your own custom colors, logo, and everything. So this basically will just look like your checkout if you're porting people over from your business and back, and you get that full branded experience. And then, a lot of what you see today in Zaprite and a lot of what we've done happened over the last bear market. Zaprite started in 2021. I managed to raise a very small pre-seed round in Austin when I moved there at the end of 2021, and I kind of got lucky with the timing, I guess, because we went into a bear market very quickly after that. But one of the things that I did when the price was suppressed is I converted all of that money into Bitcoin, all of that VC money that I got. And so that has just allowed us to extend our runway constantly now as the price is increasing. We don't need to go out and raise money again. If we want to, we can just continue on as we are. And that's one of the beauties of having Bitcoin on your balance sheet is it really strengthens the treasury and it strengthens your business. And it allows you to just have a stronger footing for, any uncertain time that might happen, whether it is a fiat bank failure, or any kind of business event that you're going through. Again, I mentioned that what we try and do is we try and provide the best payment experience we can. We really want to focus and hone in on that one thing and do it like really, really well. And you know, myself and Parker and Will, we onboard our businesses like directly. Like we get on calls and we do one-on-ones with them, and we talk them through their setup. We show them how to connect a hardware wallet, how to connect like a Lightning node. And we do a lot of this. It's time consuming, but it's very rewarding because the customers at the other end they know exactly what they want. And it is a very intimidating thing sometimes to move into this space, to try and do something new. But these businesses are obviously like, you know, they're very receptive to this idea. So it is, you know, it's one business at a time, but we are seeing great success in that a lot of these businesses are coming already fully onboarded with the store of value thesis. So, you know, you don't need to try and sell Bitcoin to them, you just need to sell them a way to get Bitcoin on their balance sheet. And, you know, that's really what we do, you know, better than anybody else in the game. You know, I won't spend too much time on the next kind of 12, 24 months because I think I touched on it earlier, but, you know, a lot of things like we're building out a Shopify plugin at the moment. You know, we'll have QuickBooks and Xero and accounting tools and stuff like that as well. And obviously we're just continuing to work with like partners and other Bitcoin companies to work with their APIs and integrate a lot of the services that they have as well, to really just expand on what we have. And it really is just about, you know, helping more businesses to get on a Bitcoin standard. And I think we're, you know, just the testament to that this room is fuller than it was last year is, you know, indication that, you know, more and more people are becoming aware of the need for Bitcoin payments. And I know we're going to have panels later on, you know, hodling versus spending. I think you can probably guess the side I'm on, but I think it really is, you know, a time that we need to start spending Bitcoin. We need to start using it. You know, saving in Bitcoin is great. It is using Bitcoin, but we really have to start using it fully by spending it and getting it out there into the economy. Because the longer we, you know, give regulators time to put more kind of like choke points in place, the harder it's going to be. And so we need to just flood the world with sats and get it out there and get everybody using it so that, you know, it just becomes ubiquitous, and that's the way it is, and people have to deal with it. And so yeah, that's Zaprite. I think we'll probably do Q&A if we have time.
Yeah, we're going to do some Q&As there. Yeah, anybody want to ask any questions? Hang on.
Sorry, quick one. Are you open to other cryptocurrency, or is it solely Bitcoin?
Solely Bitcoin, yeah. That's you know, that's a personal decision, obviously, that I made, being a Bitcoiner through and through, is that I only wanted to deal with Bitcoin. And obviously everyone else who's joined the team, like, it's, you know, I'm not gonna bring on product people that try and like push that through. I think, you know, everybody's free to do what they want to do, but I think Bitcoin is vastly different to every other cryptocurrency. Every other cryptocurrency is just a game, it's just a gamble, there's no real use cases, maybe something will happen, maybe it won't. Bitcoin is money, simple. It's money that doesn't get devalued. And there's nothing more important than that. And so if you're doing something else and you're working on something else, or you're trying to integrate as a business, it just strips us of our time and resources that we could spend on Bitcoin. We now have to manage different blockchains and different code. But if you're working on a altcoin or different cryptocurrency, my personal view is you're just running interference on humanity's progression. We need Bitcoin, the world needs Bitcoin, and working on a cryptocurrency is just, you know, it's against my core beliefs. So yeah, that was a long-winded way of saying I'll never have cryptocurrencies in Zaprite. Okay, yeah, open to the conversation.
Okay, one more question there. How does the flow look like for people who are trying to pay in Bitcoin? And are people ever concerned about their transaction history, like other people knowing their transaction history on their wallets?
So what the flow looks like, yeah, I should have put some of those slides in, but I'm sitting outside at the booth. Come see me, and I'll give you a demo and a walkthrough at the open to anybody. I can show you how that works on that side. In terms of, are people worried about their transaction history? Are you talking specifically about merchants or payers as well, or both? Both. Well, from the payer side, it's kind of private. We don't really know anything about the payer. You know, if it's an on-chain transaction, sure, we might see where it came from, but, you know, payers can obfuscate that through coin joins and things like that, which is fine. In terms of merchants, you know, one of the questions we do get asked is like, why would I give you my expub? If I give you I'm always told not to give my expub to anybody, and now you're asking me to give it. I mean, we know about your transactions anyway, so you may as well give us the expo. There's no real issue with giving it to somebody like Zaprite. It just makes your life, you know, a heck of a lot easier by giving us the expo where we can derive all those addresses for you. In terms of, you know, are they worried about maybe Zaprite getting hacked or some, you know, the US government asking us for a record of all our transactions? Nobody's really, you know, concerned about that. They know it's a risk that's there, but you know, the benefits of accepting Bitcoin is the far outweighs that as far as they're concerned. Because, you know, all these businesses are legal businesses. We don't accept any illegal businesses where we have to sanction OFAC countries as a US corporation. So, you know, every business that signs up with us is doing legitimate, you know, things, and they're perfectly entitled to accept Bitcoin. And so as long as they do their accounting and tax, then they're not worried about, you know, transactions being out in the open or anything. Yeah.
Hello, sorry, just want to say something. See, you were saying there that you want everybody to start using more Bitcoin and transacting Bitcoin. What would be to stop what would stop the Bitcoin network increasing fees, or how would it stop fees? You know, if everybody started paying in Bitcoin, you know, is the fees going to be the same, or will the fees get higher over time?
The fees will get higher for sure. Yeah, the fees will get higher, and most people will be priced out of the base chain. That's just a reality. It's going to happen. So we have to work on layer 2, layer 3s all the time. You know, Lightning, Fedi Mints, things like that. There's a lot of development happening. But yeah, absolutely. You know, I see the base chain just being used for large settlement transactions. And even Lightning, to a degree, will become a second layer, a settlement layer as well. And we'll have to have like layer 3s and stuff for consumers. Like that's kind of the direction that we're going. But yeah, and that's a good thing, because fees need to stay high to maintain the security of the base chain. So that's the incentives at play and working. And so yeah, that's great.
So who would set the fees in? Is it just Bitcoin or just a whole then?
The free market will set the fees. Every block has limited space, and if you want to get a transaction, your transaction takes up a certain amount of bytes, a certain amount of storage space in that block, and depending on how big your transaction is, like how many inputs and how many outputs, it gets larger depending on the inputs and outputs. One input, two outputs, like a sending into a change address is the smallest transaction. Well, one input, one output is the smallest. But as you start growing, so if you're a large institution and you have like many inputs and many outputs, maybe you're doing withdrawals for customers and stuff, those transaction fees are going to get quite high, and you're just going to have to bid for space in the next block. And so the free market will control those fees, and they'll just keep going up and up as Bitcoin usage grows, which will just keep securing the chain, which will obviously going to be self-fulfilling circles. It'll just keep going.
Okay, thank you.
But just to put a point on that, John, yeah, that's why Lightning and Liquid and all these other things have been developed now as well to keep the fees down. Just explain that a little bit maybe, yeah?
Yeah, I mean, it's always been kind of assumed and known that fees will get very high, and we see that when there is spikes in activity and things, and especially everything that's going on with ordinals and everything now, you can see them just bidding out all the space in the blocks, and fees are just going through the roof. So that's always been expected. And so, you know, Lightning's been around since 2015. It's, you know, it works, it's great. There's still a lot of development that needs to be done. Liquid is there, doesn't really get much use, but it's starting to get used now, particularly with swaps, you know, between Liquid and Fedi Mint and Lightning and things like that. And these are all really great tools to keep fees down. Yeah.
Okay, great. We have another question over here.
I actually have two questions, if that's okay.
Yeah.
The first one is, so we use Stripe in our business at the moment. It's not very popular, but anyway. I'm just wondering, if you adopt Zaprite, there's obviously a facility just to take fiat payments as normal, is there?
Yeah, did you say Stripe?
Yeah.
Yeah. So we allow you to connect your Stripe account. So we basically use Stripe Connect, which you basically just go through an authentication process within Zaprite. You log into your Stripe account, and then it just bounces you back to Zaprite, and it's now connected. And so basically we'll then just load a credit card form on our checkout, so when somebody pays that, it goes straight into your Stripe account.
Okay, so like what I mean is, so if somebody went to pay, we have a tax practice, if somebody went to pay, would they see Zaprite and see the options to pay in cryptocurrency or in Bitcoin, for example, and a normal facility to pay in fiat?
Yeah, exactly. So you can see this screen here on the right, they see like Lightning, Bitcoin, and card.
Okay.
So that's what you'll be presenting your customer with. And again, you can incentivize those by putting discounts and premiums, but card in this instance, it just connects to your Stripe and loads up a credit card for you.
Okay. Second question I had was you mentioned earlier, so obviously I understand from the side you want to receive in your Bitcoin and you've got your wallet, etc. But you mentioned it's wallet to wallet, but can the customer pay from their exchange, so from Binance or whatever? It's not wallet specific, if that makes sense.
No, basically we're just showing anybody, and that's obviously like the beauty of Bitcoin is you can really pay from anywhere. We do see problems with exchanges, especially related to the last question. When fees are high, exchanges tend to batch transactions maybe every 24 hours. And so we do kind of see problems where it kind of messes with our timing and stuff like that. And sometimes, there's other issues that can happen when people pay from exchanges. Sometimes an exchange will deduct a fee and send a below amount, so it gets recorded as an underpayment on our checkout, and it kind of might cause issues with customers and stuff. But it doesn't happen that often. But yeah, it's possible to pay from anywhere.
So that's great. Thank you.
No problem.
Hi, I've just got a question around capital allocation. So if you know that Bitcoin has been one of the best performing assets in the world since 2008, how do you make the decision between choosing to invest the next incremental euro or dollar into your own infrastructure versus choosing to buy more Bitcoin? And do you make that on a returns basis, and how do you measure that impact?
Well, for Zaprite, we just pretty much hold all our treasury in Bitcoin. Everything that comes in, we charge subscriptions, which is, I don't think I mentioned, but we can't charge a transaction fee on the volume that goes through our platform because we're non-custodial. So we're just a traditional SaaS platform, so we charge monthly annual subscriptions to access the platform. We have a card option on that, like a checkout like this, that allows people to pay. 83% of people pay in Bitcoin, either on-chain or Lightning, and 17% in fiat. We convert that fiat, almost immediately into Bitcoin. So our treasury just constantly sits in Bitcoin because, as I mentioned at the start, it just allows us to keep extending our runway. It can be risky for some businesses who are just starting out to put everything into Bitcoin, but if you know that your runway is small enough and you know your timing, then you can. It's going to be a personal choice at the end of the day for every individual person and business. Yeah. All right, I think that's
okay.
It.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot there, John. And if anybody wants to talk to John out there, he's outside and has a stand out there, and he's going to show you how it works. Yeah, so just go out to him and just get a little demonstration of him, a live demonstration. Okay. So the next speaker that we have coming up is Robin Thatcher. He came over from the UK. He's here to talk about how to stay tax compliant, because that's what everybody wants to know, don't they? So here we go. Come on up, Robin. Thank you.
There for a second if you want.
If anybody wants any water, there's a water station over there on the right hand side, or your left hand side. Just grab the water. Yeah, and there's if anybody wants to go out and get a bit of swag, there's t-shirts out there. There's only 21 of these, so grab them. Go run, quick, look at the stampede.
They'll be really valuable in the future, like old Dublin jerseys.
Okay. 5 minutes, 5 minutes, okay?
Is that okay like that? Or how do we get that on? How do we get that on the
2 minutes, 30 seconds. Everybody's disappearing. Come back.
How do we I'll use it for all that shit and come back in. How do we get this on the big screen? I think so. Yeah, I know what you're saying. Small percent. Here we go. So let Robin sit here.
Okay, we're ready to go. Come on. Go on, Robin Thatcher. Talking about tax, what everybody wants to know about. Let's go.
On the tax. So no one wants to know about So yeah, my name's Robin Thatcher. I run a business in the UK that's an accountancy business called By the Book Accountancy, and from there I opened something called cryptotaxhelp.co.uk. It's just, I got into crypto about 3.5 years ago, happened to be an accountant and realised that there's a bit of a niche for that there. As with a lot of people in this room probably, I went down the altcoin route to start, made no money, lost everything, and then discovered that Bitcoin is the only answer. I do tax for all of cryptocurrency, but my biggest disclaimer here is I'm not an Irish tax consultant, I am a UK tax consultant. I can give you advice on how to set up business and personal. That's what I'm here for today, to sort of talk about how compliance works, how we can set up, how we can help our existing accountant. One thing I'm really keen on as well is that a lot of business owners or personal tax people have existing relationships with accountants who might not know about crypto. Me personally, I'll work with their accountant, I'll help them do their crypto side of things, and that's what I'll sort of talk you through, how to set up, how to work with your existing accountant. I appreciate it's quite a personal relationship for people, so it can be difficult to switch. So yeah, I am around all day. People will have questions. Feel free to collar me and ask any questions you want. So I'm going to start off with personal tax. I'm going to apologise first of all. I wrote this again this morning because I managed to lose a flash drive on the plane with my presentation on. So that is my excuse for why it's so bad. I do appreciate as well that tax is one of the most boring subjects. It is my life, so please bear with me. I do know, I speak to people all the time. I'm that person at parties that talks about tax. So where to start? This is from a personal point of view, first of all, on personal investments. What I'd always advise people, whether it's a friend or whether it's someone that comes to me, is you need to set up some sort of record keeping mechanism. Now, one of the things I've found since becoming a Bitcoiner is there's certain rules. Some of those rules are around not asking people what their stack is. Totally understand that. Make sure you're upfront and clear with someone about what you're willing to talk to them about, whether it's an existing accountant or a new accountant. They should be able to work within those parameters. I will work with a client and say, okay, what do you not want to tell me? Because if you don't want to tell me how much you've got, all I need to know is your cost base. So in the UK, we work with something called Section 104 pooling, which means that, say you buy 10 Bitcoin over 10 years, and your cost base fluctuates, all that matters is how much you paid for that 10 Bitcoin. You divide it by 10, that's your cost base per Bitcoin. So that's how we work out your cost base. So I'll have clients who will say to me, over the course of my lifetime, I've spent £5,000 per Bitcoin. That's all I need to know. I don't need to know how many they've got. I don't need to know the rest. Then when they tell me what they've sold and how much they've sold, I can work out their gains from there. That's quite easy for me. So I will have people who come to me and go, here's my cost base, here's the dates I sold and how much I sold. I can work out how much taxable gains they've got. So my advice would be, as I say, be open with that, with whoever you're dealing with, whether that's your accountant. There are softwares out there that help us. So I work with various crypto tax softwares. There's Coinly, which is probably the easiest one to use. There's one in the UK called Recap, they're quite new. Coinly, the reason I suggest Coinly quite a lot is you don't pay anything to set up with it, and it's quite easy to use. You import your wallet addresses, you can link APIs on exchanges, and it will pull through all your transactions for you. The only side that I find challenging sometimes in Coinly is private wallets. When you send to private wallets and cold storage, you might not feel comfortable putting that wallet address into a piece of software. Security is always a big issue, I understand that. If you work with an accountant that's Coinly savvy, so one thing I'll do for clients is I can create wallets on Coinly and just say, I can see that transaction, that's you sending to a cold wallet, I don't need the address, I can manually tag that address for you, so I can create something. So it's just about being open and having that conversation. One thing I will say on that point is if your accountant is not crypto savvy or Bitcoin savvy, have an open conversation with them, because the biggest misconception I see at the moment is accountants, and this is not criticising anyone, but they've been in the game a long time, they like to think they know everything, they don't want to tell their client they don't know something, they will give a wrong answer. And I will tell you, this is me being, again, completely honest, us as accountants, we're so unaccountable for what we do. If HMRC or if the revenue writes to you, or if you've done something illegal, I'm not the one whose door they'll knock on. It'll be your door because you sign everything I do off. So I do see a lot of bad advice going around. So my advice would be speak to someone that you know is savvy. Have a conversation with them beforehand to validate that they know what they're talking about. And I don't just mean, do you know about crypto or do you know about Bitcoin? Ask them some technical questions, challenge them, because you can wean out when someone's going to give you bad advice from there. I'm happy to have a technical conversation with someone. I love Bitcoin, I love talking about it. If you are speaking to someone that doesn't know Bitcoin and doesn't understand what they're talking about, it's a real risk to you, personal tax and business tax wise. So I would have that open conversation. If not, if they don't deal with it, and like I say, a lot of people have been with accountants for years, have an open conversation with them about would they be willing to work with someone else who can be crypto savvy for you. If you imagine in an organisation, you'd have a finance director. That finance director, if they don't deal with crypto, would hire someone to deal with crypto. It's exactly the same for you, whether it's personal tax or business. You need someone that's a specialist in that area. This area is going to grow. We all know it's going to grow, and it will get easier. But right now, it's a challenge in the accountancy industry. So I will say that. Different types of tax. So again, I'm being really careful here because I'm not an Irish tax expert. But in the UK, we have capital gains tax and we have income tax. It's really important to distinguish what different types of tax might be involved with the transactions that you're doing. So for example, in a personal capacity, if you are getting paid in Bitcoin for something, that's income. And it's income on the GBP amount or the euro amount on the day that you receive it. So if I receive 1 Bitcoin today for payment of service for speaking here, they're not, but just imagine I did. It would be the euro equivalent as at today's rate that I'm paying income on. Now, if I choose to hold on to that Bitcoin, what is important is I'm holding an investment. It's exactly the same, and I always spread this out. It's the same as me receiving income in the euro equivalent of 1 Bitcoin today, and then deciding to invest it. Because what I'm effectively doing is holding it into a new tax system. The reason that's important, we all know about volatility. If you hodl and then tomorrow Bitcoin falls 60%, you have got an income tax bill on today's Bitcoin price, but you've then got a loss in capital losses on tomorrow's Bitcoin price, which could be a loss of 50%. What you've got is a tax bill, let's for argument's sake, say Bitcoin 60,000 euros today, you'll get an income tax bill on 60,000 euros, but tomorrow you've only got 30,000 euros, and you can't offset one against the other. The loss is a capital loss, which falls under capital gains. So it falls into a separate tax system. I've seen a lot of people fall at that hurdle. So it's about risk management as well. When you receipt it, understanding how much you want to hold on to. So that falls into the tax considerations. Here we talk, sorry, yeah? Are you assuming that 1 Bitcoin is sold, that you just received income? The moment you receipt it as income, it's not about selling or buying, it's a separate transaction. So the moment you receipt it, it's as if you received 50,000 euros, 60,000 euros of income in fiat, yeah. It doesn't matter that it's in Bitcoin. Your choice then is whether you hold it in Bitcoin or convert it. So I heard someone say earlier that they keep all their Bitcoin on their balance sheet. That's fine, but it's treated as a separate transaction. It's a sale immediately. That sale is recognised in your profit and loss, whether it's personal or business. But then you decide to hold on to it. So it's as if you've then reinvested it, because it doesn't matter that you've received it. It doesn't matter if you receive it in Bitcoin, it doesn't matter if you receive it in gold, whatever you receive it in, the GBP equivalent at that day is what matters, because you've technically received it. Sorry, I hope that makes sense, and I apologise if I do. So market opportunities for accountancy out there. As I said earlier, the accountants market at the moment is very much in a transitional phase. You will find a lot of accountants won't touch crypto. That's why I put this on there, because if they don't, that's absolutely fine. Like I say, you can work around it, but someone like myself, there's other people out there, we will have an open conversation with you. I'm not going to sit there and say you need £1,000 to sit in a room with me. Generally speaking, the way I work is someone can have an initial call with me, and hopefully that builds a relationship. If it doesn't, though, I can point them in the right direction and give them a bit of advice. This market will grow for accountants, but we're in a real resistance period at the moment. You have people like myself who are open to it, who see Bitcoin for what it is in the future. You'll have a lot of accountants who'll still laugh and scoff and say it's going to zero. So you do have to bear that in mind when you're having these conversations. And software, I talked a little bit about earlier. As I say, the important thing for me with software and with a client is always to say, when you set it up, are you paying for it from day one? The reason I say Coinly you don't pay to set up. You simply set it up. You can use, it's non-KYC, so you can set up a proxy email address. They're not going to ask for any ID. They're not going to ask for anything. You don't have to worry about that. You can set it up, and if you think it's accurate, or if you're happy with the information it pulls through, you pay for the software once you actually need a tax report from it. It's compliant with different jurisdictions, so you can set the jurisdiction. It's a really good bit of software, and the reason it's the best is it's probably been around the longest, so it's adapted the most. Okay, so I've put Bitcoin in the finance and accounting industry, but it's general business tax now. So I'm more talking about from legal entities of business owners and business holders. So someone in the previous slideshow talked about businesses accepting Bitcoin. That's absolutely fine. But as I talked about earlier, it's really important that you work with someone who understands the accounting in the background, because it is not easy. And when I say it's not easy, you need to understand, when I talk about compliance in the UK, it's actually very similar in Ireland from a business tax perspective, because we use something called accounting standards. So accounting standards are generally accepted all around the world, and they should be similar. So when you receipt your Bitcoin, you make a choice of what you do with it. But what matters is in your profit and loss, if you're receiving it for a service or in exchange for something, it is classed as a sale on that day. So then you make a physical choice to keep that Bitcoin, and it goes into your treasury management, and it goes into as part of your treasury. So that's affecting finance and accounting quite significantly, because I think it can be quite a blasé subject that's quite easily brushed over to say, oh, it's okay, it's just an asset on our balance sheet. There are specific ways that Bitcoin and crypto as a whole need to be treated on a balance sheet. They need to be treated in a certain way. They need to be revalued at the end of each period. You revalue them to their current valuation. You don't realise the profit and loss, you don't realise the gain on your profit and loss, but you do realise the gain on your balance sheet or the loss on your balance sheet. And it sits in something called the revaluation reserve. Now, what I find is, as I said before, some accountants know, some accountants don't. Ask your accountant if they understand. Ask them how it should be treated. Get an answer in writing. I can tell you now, I have 10 people at least who've written to me and gone, this is what my accountant has said. Is this right? Now, if their accountant's right, I actually had one last week, and they sent a perfect answer, and I went back to them and said, in 3 years of crypto accounting, that's the best standard answer from an accountant I've seen, because it is absolutely spot on how the accounting treatment should be. So that person went away and was happy that their accountant knew what they were talking about. But if you're not sure, you should ask the question, get it in writing, and seek a second opinion. Again, I understand that accounting relationships in business especially can last a long time and can be really important, but this is going to be a significant part of your balance sheet and treasury potentially, so you need to ensure it's being accounted for correctly. And once again, I go back to my previous point that the accountant is not responsible. You as a business owner or director are going to be signing off those accounts at the end of the year as correct. So it's important to take accountability on understanding it. Don't expect you to understand the debits and credits in the background, but obviously taking accountability for what's happening. What's on the horizon? I can talk from a UK perspective. I'm involved with a company called Crypto UK. We speak regularly to HMRC. There are international reporting frameworks coming in place for crypto. Unfortunately, crypto and Bitcoin fall into the same bracket for tax and compliance at this moment. One of the things I'm trying to lobby with HMRC, but I guarantee I'll get nowhere, is separation of Bitcoin and of the cryptos, because I do think they should be treated different. But at the moment, those reporting frameworks are coming in. What that means for businesses is that Bitcoin is a risk for all businesses. It should be, most businesses should have something called a risk register. Bitcoin should be on every business's risk register, because if it's not, they stand to be left behind. If it is, what that means is you need to understand not just what's happening, but what might come in the future. Those reporting frameworks can change massively. Accepting Bitcoin as payment is great, but in the future, that could mean you have to carry out really stringent checks on your customer, because you need to be aware of who that customer is, what they're doing, where that source of funds is coming from, because it's not, under anti-money laundering regulations, it's not acceptable to just say, I didn't know that person was doing something wrong. So in future, I think those reporting frameworks are coming in. As I say, I can't give you more detail than that, because at the moment, discussions are very light, but I do know that anti-money laundering and those sorts of checks are very heavy on the agenda of those organisations. So risk controls and compliance, what I wanted to talk about here was very much custody. So I think it was talked about earlier as well in more detail. Now, I'm not an expert on this, but one thing to consider when you're a business is the custody of your Bitcoin. How are you going to hold it? Where are you going to store it? How many signatures do you need on that? And what's the risk of that? Because it's great having a ledger that's got one signature, but when the person that's in control of that ledger loses that ledger, what happens? So how do you protect your business? I actually read this morning of a massive crypto business that lost one of its signatures. And one of the arguments was actually, it was a lot of people were feeling really sorry for them and saying how bad it was, but actually they're a crypto business and they've lost a signature of their wallet. It's just not acceptable. It's not excusable. So as a business owner, regardless of the size of your business, it's really important to get that in place. There are multi-signature custody options where if you're a sole director or owner business, you can put other things in play. You need to consider what if the worst happened. If at the moment, and this is me being completely honest, I'm currently doing a multi-signature option for mine, because if I walked out and got hit by a bus tomorrow, I know that my family would not have a clue what to do. So it's a real risk from that option. My treasury could disappear with me, so that's really important to consider. How does that work? Someone talked in the last one as well about how they put all of their treasury into Bitcoin. Brilliant, fantastic. However, do you understand that if you hold over 40% of your balance sheet in an asset that is classed as an investment, you become an investment company? That's a key consideration. That's a risk, because you could be an investment company without realizing it because you're keeping all of your money in Bitcoin. So it's something you need to consider and talk to your accountant about. Again, I know I keep saying that, but I don't want to tread on anyone's toes. Different accountants might tell you different things, but it's key to have those conversations with your accountant, because I'm one of them. I've got to consider what I'm going to do as I grow my treasury management more into Bitcoin. Where's that going to go? Well, it might lead me to have to open another company that's going to be a sole investment company for my existing trading company to stay compliant and ensure that I'm accurate with what I'm doing. They're all considerations that business owners have to do. So it's not just about, it's not as easy as it might sound to just say, yeah, I'm going to hold it all. It's great, but Bitcoin isn't cash, and it's not cash at the minute, and that's one thing to really understand. It is an investment. It's what, in the accounting industry, we call it an intangible asset. It's not a touchable asset. It's something that you're holding on your balance sheet, so it is an investment. It's not cash. It's not anything else that you can liquid and trade. It's as if you've bought property, regardless of whether you agree with that or not. That's how it's treated in the accounting industry. So it's key to understand that. Controls. So in a business, you have to have controls. I've talked about it a bit with multi-sig, but it's ensuring that things are recorded correctly. So again, in the last presentation, we talked about how sales, you might sell something directly into Bitcoin. We need to make sure that's recorded correctly on your profit and loss. So while these things are great, the software in the background, so I use QuickBooks Zero, all of those things need to be recording it correctly in the background to make sure that, as I said earlier, the sales are being reported on the day that they're received as to what they are. It doesn't mean, I used the example earlier, if I get one Bitcoin today at 60,000 euros, if it's worth 30,000 euros in a week, it doesn't mean I only sold 30,000 euros. I still sold 60,000 euros, and that is recorded at that day. I then invested that 60,000 euros and got a 30,000 loss on my investment, sat on my balance sheet. So that's important to understand. And then if you don't sell that asset, you've never realised that loss. So it never touches your P&L. So again, you can be in a position where you've sold a lot, but you've not got a lot of treasury if the price action goes that way for you. Compliance. So compliance, I've pretty much covered it in the rest of it, just ensuring your documentation is all up to scratch and covered for everything. And then pretty much realisation of I've gone too far. Realisation of gains was just the other one that I wanted to cover. So I just mentioned it there. Ensuring that anything on your balance sheet, you're effectively monitoring and tracking to ensure that if you don't sell it, you're realising what you're holding and what gains or losses you may have, and then talking to your accountant about how you might want to deal with that in future and going forward. And I thought I was going to actually run really short, but I think I'm out of time anyway, so I will take some questions.
Yeah, we'll take a few questions there. Andy, any questions? Yeah, over here. Have you got a mic over here on this side?
Hello?
Yeah, hang on.
Thanks. If you've got Bitcoin, you have to report it every year.
So the accounting goes that you're supposed to track it every year on your balance sheet. You have to report it on your balance sheet. It doesn't go as much detail to say the revenue or the accounts that you show don't say Bitcoin or crypto, they'll say intangible assets or assets. So it's only that level of detail that will be visible.
But if you don't report it, say, for 2 or 3 years down the road, now.
If you're holding it on your company's balance sheet, you have to report it every year, because you have to follow tax every year.
What about individual, private individual?
You don't have to report it. If I bought Bitcoin today as an individual, I don't have to report it at all until I sell some.
So it could be 2 years down the road?
Correct.
No, that's fine, thank you.
You're all right, so. I'll get Bitcoin. He's a whole coiner.
When you're a millionaire, yeah?
Okay, hold on.
Hi, how are you? Just wondering, I'm also a tax consultant, just so you know. Yeah.
Hang on, what are you doing her? That's unfair.
It's very unfair, actually. Just wondered, so, just in terms of, I know there's software and all that people can use to record their income, right? I don't know how knowledgeable people in revenue are, HMRC, just in relation to tracking your income, for example, right? But let's say you had a sale of 60,000. Let's say you had a sale of 60,000, for example, right? But you got paid in Bitcoin, and you know that the price can fluctuate a huge amount in 24 hours. There is probably a scope there to record that at whatever price you wanted during the 24 hours, would you say? If you didn't have a timestamp software.
If you didn't have a timestamp, yes.
And would that be acceptable, do you think? Like, you know, I know it's not acceptable, but how would they?
I get what you're asking. I use a 24-hour average price. So I would use a recognised coin tracker and use a 24-hour average moving price.
Unless the specific time.
Unless the specific time is visible. So generally when people give me a date, they won't give me a timestamp, I will use the 24-hour average price of that day. If there was a massive fluctuation in the price of that day, say over 10%, that was material, I would ask them to try and get me more detail. But I've never had that as an issue.
Thank you.
Hi Robin, another accountant in the room. Sorry, my name's Kieran Doyle. I'm actually the co-author of the Irish Crypto Tax Guide on Coinly, so I'm glad you like it. My question for you is very simply, have you had much engagement with HMRC? Because we're trying to talk to revenue and they're not very responsive. So what are they like in the UK?
So at the moment I am having engagement with them. I think I mentioned I'm part of an organisation called Crypto UK.
Yes.
So I joined them they were having tax meetings with HMRC in the room. I don't know, are you familiar with CARF, the Crypto Asset Reporting Framework?
Yes.
So I'm having meetings with HMRC present about that at the minute, probably bi-weekly meetings. I would say HMRC's team is about this big for something that's going to be this big.
It's bigger than the one we have.
Exactly. So yeah, I am having engagement with them, but I think they're really, really playing catch up still.
Agreed. And the other thing, if I could ask, does DAC 8 apply in the UK now that you're no longer in the EU, the Directive on Administrative Cooperation? It kicked in last November in terms of crypto asset service providers providing data to your local tax authority. Does that apply in the UK?
It does, yeah. So what's actually happening in the UK, I don't know if you're aware, we've changed our regulations so that to actually promote crypto in the UK, you have to be a UK entity registered with the FCA. That kicked in about the same time, so it might be linked. What happened was people like Binance stopped interacting with UK customers. You couldn't open a Binance account. KuCoin, for example, you couldn't even download in the UK if you're a new customer. That was because you had to have a UK entity registered with the FCA. Crypto.com and Coinbase, who I'm with, I know they set up UK entities, and they basically went, from now on we're registering as a UK entity. The reason they did that is from 2027 in the UK, as part of their reporting framework, they have to give customer details if asked to the UK HMRC.
That ties in with DAC 8. Yeah, lovely. Thank you very much.
No worries.
Okay, last one just here.
How you doing? Yeah. Just a question around the value, say the fluctuating value of if you purchase a service from, if you had a company and the value drops, you had mentioned that you wouldn't have the right to write off the capital gain, if you like. Working in reverse, if you bought something, say for 60k, you said previously if it went to 30, you couldn't write the 30 off. If, let's say for example, it goes to 100k, are you liable for capital gains on the 40k of increase in the value of the coin?
Is that as a company or an individual?
As a company.
As a company, no, you're not. So what happens in a company is you revalue it. So on your balance sheet, it would go from 60k to 100k of asset.
Yeah.
Then you have something called a revaluation reserve, which is on your balance sheet. You don't declare it as part of the profit and loss, but it is declarable on your balance sheet. It goes there. That 40k gain would sit on your revaluation reserve. If you then sold that, you release the 40k gain to the profit and loss account where it gets realised, but only when you sell it.
So it's a corporation tax thing then, basically?
Yeah, it's corporation tax.
Yeah.
Companies don't pay capital gains tax in the UK.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. That it? Any more? One more question.
That was the last one.
Okay, last one over there in the corner. Hang on, we get you a mic there now. 1 second.
Morning. What's the exit strategy? So I put the Bitcoin on the balance sheet, I leave it for 5 or 10 years. I want to retire to the Caribbean island, wherever. Do I liquidate the company? What do I do?
Someone that gets paid a lot more than me can tell you that. What do you do? Well, you talk to the right accountant and you get a tax plan in place. Like I say, there's people, there's a guy in the room, Rich, who's speaking later. I would be recommending you to someone like him. Basically, they deal with high net worth individuals. They'll give you a plan to leave the UK and be tax efficient with it. There's people like that exist. Tax barristers would be involved and you'd be paying a lot of money for it. But that's why I say they go above my pay grade. You'd want to be putting some real tax efficient plan in place if you know you've got that asset available to you. Because once you realise that gain, you're going to pay tax on it in the company. But then obviously the difficulty is getting that money out of your company into your name. It's not simple and there's not a way around it without paying tax as such. It's about building a good plan on the best way to do that. Sorry, that's a real sit on the fence answer there.
Okay, thanks a lot. Robin, thanks a lot for everything. And if anybody wants to find a little bit more, Robin's here for the afternoon. You can talk to him outside there and pick his brain, wreck his head about all this taxation stuff, yeah? Okay, thanks. So I just have Captain Remy up here with us now, okay? So Captain Remy, about 30 Irish Bitcoiners went over to Madeira in April, and I met Captain Remy over there. I was introduced to him before that, and he's been sailing around the world. And he's going to tell a little bit about his journeys and where he's been and what's been going on. And he's an amazing story. Just for 2 minutes while we set this up for Peter Dunworth to zoom in, yeah? Okay.
Yeah, I'm filling the gap.
He's filling the gap. Go on.
Yes, I'm Remy.
Tell him about last night. We weren't even drinking last night. He was like, oh, I'm really drunk. I'm like, we're taking it easy. We have a conference tomorrow.
He's drinking with the Irish now.
Yes, so I decided 2 years ago to quit my job and to try to sail for the moment around Western Europe and then maybe the world, just to enjoy life and also to spread the Bitcoin spirit. So I'm trying to meet new people, Bitcoiners or also Bitcoiners. I'm trying to organize also Bitcoin meetups everywhere, and I'm going also to different conferences, like in France, in Biarritz. I don't know if you know Surfing Bitcoin, it's the biggest French conference. Then I went in Madeira for Bitcoin Atlantis, where I've met Lawrence. Now I'm here. So yeah, it took me like maybe, it was in February, in March, so
yeah, March, yeah, the beginning of March.
2 months to come here.
Sailing.
Low time preference.
Tell us where you stopped off. When you left Madeira, where did you go to?
After Madeira?
Yeah.
Yeah, I sailed to Azores Island because I'm mixing like two passions, like Bitcoin and sailing. So if you want one time to try to sail with me, follow me on Instagram, Twitter, or whatever. Sailboat Project. And for the next months I will be in the Irish Sea. I'm gonna sail to Isle of Man too, maybe Belfast, Liverpool, and then I will come back in Brittany for the summer.
Yeah, he's gonna go to the Isle of Man. You're going to Belfast first,
Belfast,
aren't you?
yeah.
Then he's going to go over to the Isle of Man. We've introduced him to Coin Corner over there. They're going to be welcoming him over there. He's going to the TT races. Then he's going to the TT races, so they've got to put him up there. So they've got to meet up over there. Keep on carrying on drinking, having the buzz.
It's a little bit the same, but on the sea.
So are you paying with Bitcoin as you go?
I'm accepting Bitcoin, of course.
No, are you paying for your gas, your food on these different places with Bitcoin?
I'm trying to.
How's it working?
It's not working everywhere, of course. Mainly in Marina, they don't accept Bitcoin, but sometimes there's like bars or different, bars. I like bars. So, I'm trying to like spending a little bit my weekends just to experience the thing and meet people who are already engaged. But it's quite, let's say that it's quite rare. In France, like maybe in Brittany, there's maybe 4 shops. In Portugal, a little bit more. Gibraltar. In Madeira, it was quite impressive. Maybe 60 shops, like goods or services. 2 in Azores. I'm trying to explore. As I don't remember the name, he talked about BTC Map. You know, BTC Map, the app to find services with Bitcoin. So I'm trying.
Okay.
So, how much?
Ask another question.
Sorry?
Yeah, keep asking questions. Sorry, we're having a bit
My
of a
boat,
technical issue here.
it's a sailing vessel of 34 feet from Jano Sunrise 34, French company. So, and I'm working on a next project, next version for the project. It will be a huge catamaran for 8 people. I think it will be ready in 1 year. So it will be more comfortable, a little bit more luxury, because mine is, it's a good one, but a little bit small. And to continue this project around the world, so with lots of devices on board, like water maker, satellite communications, everything. So if you want to discover that kind of adventure, don't hesitate to contact me.
Yeah, did you tell them about the new project that you're doing, the catamaran, 4 bedrooms, 8 people, big massive thing. They're being sponsored by Bitcoiners. Yeah, two really cool guys, So people can go and travel around the Caribbean on this massive catamaran, pure luxury, so Bitcoin is the future. Start saving in it.
Can you explain the Thierry Henry handball, no?
So what?
Sorry, I didn't understand.
Can you explain the Thierry Henry handball? I know it's
Thierry
French,
Henry
sorry.
handball. Thierry Henry
Oh, you were
handball.
French, sorry.
Okay, cool. Thanks a lot. So now we're going to have Peter Dunworth zooming in here.
Peter, can you hear us?
Clearly. Have you got me? Can you hear me?
Mic check. Go ahead, Peter. Let's hear you.
All right. Hopefully you can hear me.
We're going to turn up the volume here. Okay. Yeah, so Peter, if you just want to, just turn up the volume there. Just want to jump in a little bit and just explain a little about who you are and what your background is a little bit, Be great.
Sure
Just to
thing.
start off a little bit, will we sort out the volume over there?
Hopefully this comes through, but
Yeah, it's coming through now. Perfect. Let's go.
Wonderful. I might just see if I can share the screen and we'll
Is that loud enough, guys?
we'll get going from that.
Make a full screen there, yeah? You can, Peter.
Trying to do that.
Recording in progress.
How are we looking at now? Is that better?
Start presentation mode, presenting mode, so it'll make it full screen.
That good?
On the bottom there, full screen.
Come on, someone knows the answer.
We're not technical people.
We've 300 people here, we'll figure it out. Go back, I think, Peter, back to the other window.
I know. Okay. Getting closer.
Oh, I know. It's true.
Top left corner there. Top left corner, somebody said, from beginning? Yeah, like that, click that. Oh,
Yeah, that's what I've clicked. Are we good?
One of these, no?
One of the ones on the bottom. What about the ones on the bottom there? I don't know. You're using one of them dodgy Macs. I don't know anything about that. You know what I mean? That's why I don't use them.
Okay. Let's see.
Let's have a look here. It must be here on this page.
Let me see if this works. Present in Teams. Okay.
What about start slideshow there, just underneath the one you're clicking? Down, back, just down. Is that clickable now?
Oh, maximize.
No, they're all over.
Maximize.
Maximize.
Top,
We got maximize.
the top right, top right. In the
Top
middle.
right, somebody said.
Top right in the middle, top right. Yeah, up there, you're
Up there.
close. You're
Up
close.
there?
You're close. There's a button up there to maximize.
Okay, we have an expert on site.
No. This is great.
I'll leave it up to them anyway. So,
Down here.
it'll make easy.
Yeah, this one. Oh yeah, okay. Now we know where we need to go. We just need to guide you there, Peter.
Okay, right.
Move to the right.
Mm-hmm.
Now go down, diagonal right down to the bottom of the page.
Yep.
Okay, and yeah, you're very close. Just to the left now. To the left, to the left, to the left, to the left. The other left. Not adjusting that one. Just go back to the right. Now one more icon over, and then the next icon over. That's the baby there.
Are we on?
Go to display settings on the top left. Sorry, we have another expert here. We got a new expert. I'm going to put the new expert on.
Hey, Peter. If you
Yeah,
use the same
hi.
icon that you were at before, so down the bottom right. Yeah.
Yep.
And then on the top left here, so click on that, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the top left where it says display settings, yeah,
Yeah.
click that, and then click swap presentation view. Yeah.
Thank you, guys.
Welcome, Peter. We've got a huge crew here in the room, excited to listen to you. So we'll let you take it away, man.
Well, Denny, thanks very much for having me. It's Saturday night, 9 p.m. here, and there's no one else to talk to about Bitcoin, so I'm thrilled that you invited me all the way across the world to talk to your crew. I'm excited and wish I could be there. And the presentation I want to talk about today is none of us have enough Bitcoin. We're basically short Bitcoin. And we're going to run through not only why we're all short Bitcoin, but what are the other options out there. I want to give you a history of portfolio construction, which sounds really dry and boring, but these are the things I think are really important to understand when you understand the consequential history of portfolio construction and why a lot of the people in your TradFi lives are going to really push back on Bitcoin. And when you can present arguments, rationale, and important points about why traditional finance and why traditional portfolio construction is basically dead, and why you need to start looking at Bitcoin as a more integral part of your portfolio, that's going to be really powerful in not only helping you self-process why you need to have more of this, but more importantly, helping educate those people around you as to why this is the most important thing that you can be doing. And I'll just sort of get cracking here. Background about me, I've been in Bitcoin since, well, I guess as a family since 2013. I've been giving advice on it since 2016. A story I'd love to share with everyone because firstly, it's somewhat therapeutic for me, but it's most important to share this because I feel like everyone has this story. But back in 2011, the most costly financial mistake in my life was my brother told me to buy Bitcoin when it was $3 a coin. And I told him that it never worked, governments will shut it down, there'll be a new Bitcoin. And it took me 5 years, sadly, to come to the conclusion that, oh my goodness, this is the real deal. This is the asset that I've been looking for. I share that story because I hope that if any of you are sitting on the fence thinking about, is this going to be an important part of my portfolio moving forward, or should I allocate more to it? The answer is probably yes. And if you don't have the confidence to do it, then hopefully this presentation will go a long way in educating you as to why this is the asset that you need to pay attention to. And an interesting point, my background is basically accounting and finance for the last 25 years, been giving investment advice, working in credit, helping some very wealthy Sydney families invest close to $1 billion of assets over the last decade. And interestingly, I spend nearly probably 50% of my time talking to them about Bitcoin, even though it only represents 20% of the assets that we advise, or 30% of the assets that we advise them on. And the reason is, this is the most important asset for them to come to terms with. It's the most difficult to understand, but this is the 80-20 Pareto principle, that if they understand that this is the most important asset that they need to understand in their portfolio, everything else is going to be inconsequential behind it. So I'm just conscious that we've got about 45 minutes. There's a lot to go through, and then hopefully I'm going to throw to the floor for some questions on the end of it. So we're just going to get into it. Today we're going through portfolio construction. I'm going to give you an understanding of the lay of the land. So who's responsible for portfolio construction? How are they thinking about it from a traditional finance perspective? And why this is going to change in the very near future. We're also going to define risk and volatility. I'm going to go through all of the asset classes that are out there. Then I'm going to talk about how they relate to the historical context or evolution of portfolio construction, and how now that there's this new beast called Bitcoin, this is going to change the future portfolio construction for the better, I think, but it's going to completely redefine that. And then the two things I want to finish on is basically Bitcoin being the first apex asset and the perfect money, the first triple point asset. And then I'm going to talk about how Bitcoin is basically globally ubiquitous, pristine collateral. That's a real mouthful. All you need to know is it's the best collateral ever invented, and this is going to have huge downstream consequences for value accretion in this asset long term, because people don't know it yet, but they are going to want to buy it. They're going to want to have as much of this as possible. This is going to completely redefine how we allocate assets moving forward, how we use debt in the system. And then I'm going to just finalise a couple of things in what I'm going to see, or what we're going to see moving forward with this asset, and how this is going to affect not only our personal finances, but global finances across the world, and basically why we don't have enough of it. So let's get started. Where to start? So what are we trying to achieve when we're creating a portfolio in traditional finance? You know, we're typically looking for, we want maximum returns. We want to have some form of stability. We want to have, you know, some people want to have a dividend from it. They want to create an income because they want that sense of security. And what we need to know is that this world that we have been living in for the last 100 years, or whatever that might be, has now changed indefinitely. Like, it has completely changed. There is no such thing as this world that we're accustomed to now. And to give you a very brief example of this, I put together a portfolio construction for a client who wanted to create, and use the numbers that are relevant for you, but they wanted a $1.5 million income. And we were able to create a portfolio for them with $10 million of capital to create that net income of $1.5 million. But if they wanted an income, like an income generation of it, they $1 million. So all of a sudden, when you put and transpose tax consequences on the creation of or portfolio construction, this totally redefines what you're looking at and what you're trying to achieve. So it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve with your portfolio. And for me, you know, this is sort of an interesting, you know, feedback loop on this. In traditional finance, we have a thing called Know Your Client, where clients fill out basically a risk assessment that tells us what their risk profile is, how much risk they want to take, how much return they want to make. And the conundrum with this is that this risk assessment was basically created by the fund managers to push all of the people into a balanced portfolio, because everyone answers the questions the same. They say, I don't want to take any risk and I want to maximize returns. So what does that do when you're at those poles of the spectrum? You basically end up with a balanced portfolio. And in traditional sense, what's been really interesting is that the fund managers who create those balanced portfolios, and have done for the last 100 years, generate the largest fees on a balanced portfolio as opposed to owning the individual assets that make up that balanced portfolio. So to me, I look at this and think traditional finance has just worked us into a way to maximise the fees out of clients rather than actually providing a service or the financial products that create the outcome. And this is where I think Bitcoin can completely redefine what's happening moving forward. The other thing we need to think about is timeframes. What sort of timeframes are you working to create the outcomes that you want? Is it do you want to be one and done in like 1 to 2 years? That's probably a little bit unrealistic, and you're going to have to go to the races or the track to make a few bets or the casino if you've got one. If you want to be done in less than a year. Or are you going to be building a long-term portfolio that's going to serve not only you, but the next generation? And this is where I spend a lot of my time, not only planning for the generation that we're serving now, but the next generation and the generation after that. And this is where, just a quick shout out to Rich, who's one of the speakers over there, who's coming up shortly. That is going to be a really important presentation to watch. I'd like to think it's less important than mine, but to tell you the truth, it's probably going to be more important than what I'm going to be talking about today with Bitcoin, because that's basically what Rich does, and he's one of the best. So make sure you see that. The other thing in this portfolio construction is we need to have a look at what is the acceptable level of risk that we've got. And this is where Bitcoin represents a huge misconception or misnomer with traditional finance, is that we've got Bitcoin is typically taken as a really risky asset, but that's misunderstood. And once you understand it, you realise that it's not risky, it's just really volatile. And we're going to go into that and go through that in detail. So the investment universe is made up of stocks, bonds, property, commodities, alternatives, private equity, VC, Bitcoin, crypto. We give advice on all of those. And just running around the investment universe, I'm going to quickly talk about each of them. And not one of them, but I'm going to talk about the concerns that I've got with each of those asset categories that we've got at this point in time. So if we look at stocks, we have maybe close to a third of the world's assets tied up in the stock market, the biggest stock market being the US stock market. What's interesting to note about US stocks is that out of the S&P 500 stocks, 20% of the entire S&P 500 are effectively zombie companies. They're trading basically only to afford the interest payable on their corporate debt. Now I look at this and think, well, all of a sudden that makes investing in stocks, well, easier and harder at the same time, because 20% of the investable universe is effectively a zombie company that is not going to produce an outcome for you that you want. That also then basically limits the pie down dramatically as to what we can and can't invest in. Interestingly, there's been an anomaly that's happened in the last, say, 10 years, which has completely redefined the stock market. And this has been a shift in growth v value stocks. And if you look at the stock market, they're typically, companies fall into one or two types of companies. They're either growth stocks, which are basically companies that are fast growing, that have huge potential, that have the ability to have rapidly increasing sales. If we look around the US stock market, that's typically going to be Facebook, Nvidia, Amazon, Microsoft, ironically. And those companies are growth companies with fast sales trajectory and a view to the future that's growing. Then we have value stocks, which is typically your Warren Buffett type style of investment, where they're just methodical, they're plod, they have defined cash flows out into the future that you can predictably bank on. And they're companies that have been typically around for a long time. And probably one of the most famous value companies out there is Coca-Cola. That kind of looks and acts like a bond. Excuse me. It just produces 3% dividends a year, and it basically indexes to inflation, and it continues to grow. And Warren Buffett famously said that, if he was given all the money in the world, he couldn't recreate what Coca-Cola has as far as the distribution channel. Now, why am I talking about value stocks v growth stocks? Is because that world has completely been broken. With interest rates falling to zero, and then all of a sudden they're now up at 5%, we are going to have a huge risk of a number of defaults in those corporate entities, because they used to pay interest at 1 or 2%. The interest rate or risk-free rate in the US now is 5%, and the corporate bonds are going to get reset at somewhere between 6 and 8%. So these zombie companies that have got stock, corporate bonds out at 2% are going to fall over. Now I look at this and think, there's been so much financial engineering in this stock market is that they've basically been financialised to within an inch of their life. And talking about financialisation of this within an inch of their life, a great example of that is the stock IBM. I might just get a quick show of hands. Everyone's heard of IBM, right? Hands up. Yep, great. We know who it is. We're all familiar with it. One of the greatest companies to ever exist. This company's got a stock market cap rate, a total market value of roughly $170 billion. However, over the last 25 years, they've had over $120 billion worth of share buybacks. Now that 120 billion could have been distributed to all of the investors. However, the management decided to buy its own shares back. It spent $120 billion doing that, and it's only valued at $170 billion. So it's really only made $50 billion. It should be non-existent. If it didn't have the share buybacks, the investors could have done much better by investing that elsewhere. So the reason why I bring that up is Apple started that journey in the last 7 years, and you look forward to where they are now. Warren Buffett is now exiting that position. Interestingly, arguably the greatest investor of all time has made more than 50% of his net gains over his 50 or 60-year career has been in one stock, and that is Apple. Now, I'm going to talk briefly in a moment about diversification and what that means for a portfolio, but I'll get on to bonds. And this is where bonds represent debt. You can buy basically a bond, and that will give you an issuance, like that will pay you a yield. And I look at this and think, this is a really bad investment at this point in time, because not only is it not giving you what effectively the debasement of the currency is, it's giving you the inflation risk and a counterparty risk to a person issuing it. And typically bonds are issued by governments. We've got the US government issuing more debt than anyone else. But if we shrunk the size of that US government debt down to a household, there is no way on earth the bank would lend money to them. So why anyone is buying US government bonds is a mystery to me, because you're not getting a real return on it. Every dollar you put in, they're giving you back 95 cents in a 5-year period or maybe a 2-year period. So I look at this and think that investment vehicle is not making sense from a long-term perspective, because you're not outperforming what you're getting. You're actually underperforming, so you're effectively funding the government. The famous Australian Kerry Packer once told one of our commissioners that they weren't doing a good enough job, that he wanted to pay extra tax, and I feel the same way. I don't think our governments do a great job, and I think I'm far better at spending my money than they are. And an investment in bonds is effectively an investment in your government. They take your money and then they pay you less later on. Property's been a great way to make a lot of money, but I look at this and think, with the demographics that Western democracies have, sadly Australia's in a similar position to Ireland. We are heavily reliant on migration to keep this property market propped up. And if you think your property market's bad, you should have a look at Australia. We've got in Sydney, where I live, we've got an average household is valued at $1.6 million, the average house, yet the average income in our city is $100,000. So you require 16 years worth of income with no tax on it to buy a single average home. And let me tell you that is a very average home in Sydney. It's miles from the beach, it's in the middle of a landlocked, it's something you probably not really want to aspire to. So I look at this and think, property, if I'm investing new capital today, do I want to be investing in property? We've had 40 years of falling interest rates. We've now had rates go from 0% to 5%. We now have a real risk that if you look around the commercial property around the world, in Sydney, we've got property values dropping 30, probably somewhere between 20 and 40%. If you look in the US, it's somewhere between 30 and 40%. I look at this and think, unless you're picking up a deal or you know how to change this property for the better, it's going to be a really hard slog to actually make money out of property moving forward relative to the other investments that you can make. The thing I do love about property though is that you get to borrow, and you typically don't have, you get to borrow and that debt is going to effectively decrease in value over time while your property increases. So you get a free kick with that. But are we going to continue to get that when we don't have the population drivers and the demographic drivers that we had previously? I'm not so sure of that, and I think it's a 50-50 bet, but I'm kind of gambling on things or betting on things that I don't have control over the outcome. And I don't like doing or making investments where I don't have either more information than the person on the other side of the trade, or alternatively, there are things that are unknown that I'm not familiar with and I've got no control over. The next one that I'm going to talk about, which is really briefly, commodities. Gold, silver, all the commodity baskets that we look at. It hasn't really been an investable asset class for some time, but gold and silver are now getting a lot more interest. I think a lot more people are focused on the sovereignty that holding an underlying asset like a bearer instrument in gold and silver can deliver you, because you can actually walk across borders with gold. The final one that we're going to briefly talk on is private equity, venture capital, Bitcoin and crypto. But for that private equity and venture capital, that has made up an increasingly larger percentage of people's portfolios as this volatility has gotten more and more. And there's a number of reasons for that, and I won't go into it here, but just know that a lot of the endowments for the US universities and a lot of the sovereign wealth funds have got higher and higher private equity and venture capital exposure, because it gives an outsized return and there's no volatility to the portfolio, because you only really value the portfolio at the end of the 5 or 7 or 10 year term that you're invested for. So they don't really upgrade the value of the fund on a day-to-day basis like they do the stock market. So you get this fugazi of no volatility in that type of investment, and then at the end they revalue everything up and they pay you your money back and you think, oh wow, that was really good, but you don't see the day-to-day underlying. So now that we've covered that off, I might just start with portfolio construction. Probably all of you are familiar with the 60-40 portfolio. I might just get a quick show of hands. Everyone heard of a 60-40 portfolio, 60% stocks, 40% bonds? Basically, this portfolio is dead. To me, it's been dead for the last 10 years. We haven't invested like this for the last 10 years because bonds were dead 10 years ago to us, or maybe 12 years ago. Most financial advisors will talk to you about the 60-40 portfolio because they want to avoid risk. They want to make sure that there's no catastrophic blow up in your portfolio, and they want to be perceived to be doing the right thing. But the right thing in this instance is going to be putting 60% into stocks and then 40% in bonds. In the last 2 years, we've had the worst performing long-term bond market in the last 200 years. I'm sure you would have seen in the last maybe 2 years, the UK gilt market nearly blew up if they didn't intervene. I think it was Liz Truss basically lost her job because she played chicken with the bond market. The bond market said, we don't want to do that. Within days, she was replaced by Rishi Sunak. But the interesting thing about these bonds, and this is the really troubling thing for me, is that most people think that these bond funds and these bonds are risk-free. But they're not risk-free, and they get accounted for very differently to every other asset. The accounting standards are set up in a way to promote people buying bonds and saying that they're risk-free, but they're technically not risk-free. And I'll give you an example here. We had a client forward us an investment that they made in a 40-year UK gilt. I think it was September 2022. Fast forward to, I think it was June, July, maybe even August, when that gilt market blew up in the UK. Gilts went to the roof. It was a 40-year gilt. They lost 75% of the value of that bond that they purchased. So if you put in $100, it was worth $25 9 months later. This is unheard of, and this is something that most people don't talk about, the fact that the bonds are actually very, very volatile. Now, interestingly, and when we compare this to Bitcoin, Bitcoin didn't drop 75% in 9 months. I think the best that's done in 9 months is maybe 85%. But if you look at the period that it dropped 75% and then came back, Bitcoin has actually massively outperformed it. And this is the really ironic thing, that when you look at traditional portfolios and say, oh, well, that's volatile, most people will push back on you and tell you, hey, that's not volatile, like bonds aren't volatile, but they really lack the understanding of just the instrument that it is. So what most people are at that 60 portfolio now, but they need to be at what's called, I think, a convex strategy. And this to me is where most people, it's an intermediate step between getting from a 60-40 portfolio to being on a Bitcoin standard. And the convex strategy, I might just go through this. The convex strategy is a way whereby you take out downside protection to protect yourself from a catastrophic 30 or 40% by paying 3 to 4% of the value of your assets, but for long-term volatility, downside protection. And what that downside protection allows you to do is with your portfolio is that allows you to go out the risk curve to the upside with more NASDAQ and more Bitcoin, because those are the two assets that are going to heavily outperform. So if you can protect the downside and have an outsized return if you have a black swan type event, that enables you to shift your portfolio to take more risk. So rather than being in an S&P 500 where there's got the issues that I talked of, where 20% of the 500 are zombie companies, you can then start investing in the better returning assets in the NASDAQ and Bitcoin and get a much better return. So the 3 or 4% it's costing you to protect that downside allows you to invest more heavily in Bitcoin and the NASDAQ, and that allows you to get an outsized return. So a lot of the problems with traditional finance is that they look at returns as a one-off isolated event. They don't quite understand that the returns that need to be measured are a force through time, that these are multiple events, like a racing event, that no one cares about the fastest lap in a race. What people care about is who got there, who did the 60 laps of the race in the fastest time possible. And this is where that convex strategy, if I can give you one person to look at who is the best I've seen at this, which will give you some great ideas, is a guy called David Dredge. And there was a fabulous podcast he did with a mate of mine, Ash Cooper, credit to him, who used to work with him, called Jellyc, Jellyc, and I urge all of you to go and watch that, because this guy is a master of his domain. He's the best I've seen, and he talks about risk in a way and protecting it that I haven't seen anyone else do it. And the beauty of that is that when you remove the 30 or 40% drops in a year from your strategy and your investment through time, that allows you to compound at a much faster rate and a much better rate. And it really is the compounding through time that's the most important thing to cover, not the one-off event or the one-off return in a year. And so I'm just going to check what we've got here. With the convex strategy, the interesting thing to me is you want to buy cheap volatility with the longest duration on it. And that gives you the most options. I'm just going to move along because I'm just conscious of time. Once you've moved past that, the next iteration of your portfolio construction is really just having the bulk of your assets in Bitcoin. And sadly, the cost of protecting the downside when 90% or more of your assets are in Bitcoin is too costly to protect that downside. And I'll just give you an example here. If you want to protect the downside of a 70-80% drop when you're holding all Bitcoin, that's going to cost you somewhere between 30 to 40% of your entire portfolio on an annual basis. And what's really concerning or quite, how would I put this? There are mental gymnastics required to get comfortable with this, because all of a sudden, you're in an asset that is the most volatile on earth. You've got 90% of your assets of your net worth tied up in this. And this thing can drop 75% in a year. And you need to be comfortable with that. And this is where no amount of downside protection is going to be economical with it. And this is the back and forward I've had with the Convex strategy guys, is that it's just uneconomical to put downside protection when you're that heavily invested in Bitcoin. And to give you an example, so most of our clients who have been with me for, say, the last 8 years or so are sitting on a 100x return. And that now makes up, the Bitcoin makes up the bulk of their assets. And they don't want to pay for downside protection because they're sitting on a 100x return. So if this thing drops by, from 100x down to a 50x in a year, are they really upset? they're 50x up on what they initially put in. No, they're not. They obviously would like it, to protect that downside, but if it means it costs you 20 to 40% of your net assets on an annual basis, no one's making that investment because it's just not worth it anymore. And this is where the evolution of this portfolio construction from 60 to 40 to effectively being on a Bitcoin standard is the evolution that we're all going to see. And all of you in the room now investing in Bitcoin are going to go through that process and get to, there's probably one extreme to the other sitting in the room there right now. That some people are starting with the 60-40, trying to get 1 or 2% of their net assets into it. And then you've got others in the room sitting on a Bitcoin standard thinking, yeah, that makes perfect sense. I'm not paying 20 or 30% for downside protection when I'm sitting on 100 or 1,000x return. It just doesn't make any sense economically to do that. So this is where we all get to, and it's just a matter of how long you're on the train before you get there. And this is where I think, for me, Bitcoin represents the best risk-free asset that we've seen. And I just want to make a distinction that Bitcoin is not volatility-free, and we never want it to be volatility-free, because if Bitcoin's going to get to $1 million, $10 million, $100 million a coin, we want the volatility, because the volatility comes to the upside, not so much the downside. And what's very unique about Bitcoin is that this is probably the only asset on earth that's dropped 80% on 3 or 4 different occasions and has bounced back to new all-time highs. Very few assets on earth have had the ability to do that. And this is where, for me, what Bitcoin represents, where I'm closer to probably, I'd say probably 70% of my net assets, maybe more, are tied into Bitcoin, is that for me, Bitcoin represents the risk-free asset because I've got no counterparty to it, I've got complete control of it, I'm a self-sovereign individual. I can take that asset anywhere I want on earth with me. There's no inflation, there's no debasement. And most importantly, it's a hedge from the existing system that I'm looking at that is looking increasingly fragile for the reasons that I listed earlier, that I think this is a really bad bet. If I've got cash to allocate today, there's really only one investment that I want to be making. I want to be putting all my eggs in that one basket of Bitcoin, because that is the best investment I can see by the proverbial mile. It's got the least downside, it's got the most certainty, and ironically, it's got the most upside. And this is where the portfolio construction that was developed at the 60-40 and the rest of it was really about diversification. And diversification is a great way to stay wealthy, but it is a horrible, long, painful, questionable way to get wealthy. And if you look at all the wealthiest people on earth, how have they done it? They've focused their attention on one asset and they've given 100% to that. And if you look at diversification, it's really important to be careful where and who you listen to when it comes to investment advice. If you look at the most costly investment decision of all time, it would be Bill Gates listening to his mate Warren Buffett, who said you need to diversify. By my count, it's cost him somewhere between $800 to $900 billion. We'd have a trillionaire on earth right now in Bill Gates if he didn't sell down and listen to Warren. You've got to think, what are you trying to achieve? And this is where, for me, you want to be holding the best asset. And this is where, ironically, Warren Buffett doesn't believe in diversification. He wants to be owning the best asset. And the only reason he doesn't own the best asset is because he's become so big he can't put money to work in the best asset because he's effectively become the market. And this is the trouble that he's got with Apple and trying to get out of it. So Bitcoin, not volatility free. I'm just conscious we're getting close to a mark that I want to cover off on and then throw to the floor for questions. I've covered risk in Bitcoin. So the most important thing I think we can do is learn as much as we can. A lot of people say, oh, you should really learn as much as you can before you invest. I think that's bullshit, horse shit. Should say shit another time because I completely disagree with it. The reason is that when you learn about something and you don't have your money in it, there is complete apathy. You don't give a shit about it. But when you put a significant amount of your net assets into it, all of a sudden you have a laser focus on that investment. You want to learn about it, you want to read about it, you want to listen to podcasts, you want to actually get as much knowledge on that topic as fast as possible. And the fastest way I found to do that is to invest in it. And what typically happens, and this is where say Jeff Booth and I disagree on this. He's like, oh, you should learn about it. I'm like, I'm thinking about this and thinking, people have had the last 10 or 15 years to learn about Bitcoin. There's no one on earth who hasn't heard about Bitcoin now. And the only way we're going to inspire people to learn about it is to literally walk them to the deep end and push them in and hope they swim. So for that reason, I'm all about figure out however much you're prepared to lose, walk to the deep end and invest as much money as you can as quickly as possible in this. And then hope like hell you've got a great guide and you've got someone there to pull you out if you need to. So for me, it's probably the most important thing I think you can do is to be invested in this and make sure you've got the safeguards and the provisions around you that you're not going to make catastrophic mistakes. And this is where, when I'm talking to families for the first time when we're giving investment advice, I like to tell them that they should be invested somewhere between 10 and 20% of their net assets should go into this immediately. Now, I know that that doesn't happen and they feel very uncomfortable putting anywhere near that type of money in, so it typically ends up with half of what I suggest, or maybe even a quarter, so someone ends up with somewhere between 2 and 5%. And very quickly I tell them, please be prepared for this to drop 50% the day after you purchase it. And when it does, I'm going to give you a call and I'm going to get the other 50% that you didn't feel comfortable doing, and we're going to buy more because that's going to represent a great buying opportunity. And this is where the volatility of this asset is off the charts. And being invested in Bitcoin inoculates you from the volatility in the rest of your portfolio. And you just become a creature of this volatility because you understand that over time, it's volatile to the upside, not volatile to the downside. So, do we have enough Bitcoin? I don't think anyone on earth, including Michael Saylor, has enough Bitcoin. He's come out and publicly said he doesn't have enough Bitcoin, and all he does is continue to buy Bitcoin. He's effectively got a money printer, and I wish I had one, but sadly I don't. If I look at just the setup of this investment, we've got less than 1% global adoption. It's the perfect money, it's globally ubiquitous, pristine collateral, and no one knows this. There may be 0.1% of the population on earth that actually understand what those three things represent. And this is where, hopefully, part of today and part of the work that we all do is helping people understand what this is, because when people understand what this is, this market will be 100 or 1,000x bigger than what it is now. So consider this: Bitcoin, absolutely scarce asset, globally instant settlement, it's seizure resistant, it's censorship resistant, and there's the ability for governments to print ad infinitum. They can print as much money as you want, but you can only have 21 million Bitcoin. I had a conversation with a mate of mine in a spa who posed this thought experiment with us, and he said, can you imagine, 2 or 3 generations from now, people are going to sit down where Bitcoin is basically in the hands of everyone on earth. Everyone knows what Bitcoin is and fundamentally understands what it is. And these future generations are going to laugh at us thinking that we would ever want a currency that our governments can print out of thin air relative to Bitcoin, which is absolutely digitally scarce. And I thought about that and I thought, that's a very powerful point. But it's a point that's often lost on us because we don't really understand or comprehend what that means, because we've never seen what absolute scarcity looks like. We always think, oh, well, we can have more of it, but technically we can't. So this is where Bitcoin represents a very unique asset moving forward. To me, Bitcoin is the perfect money. It's the perfect store of value, the perfect medium of exchange, the perfect unit of account. And it's got a global market of 8 billion people who actually need all of those 3 things. Yet less than 10 million people would understand what those 3 things are, or if they even needed it. And to me, I look at that and I think, just on a market sentiment basis or a market analysis, you look at the demand and supply. I've got a market that needs, that 8 billion people have a need for this, yet maybe 1 million people have figured out. And I compare that to the stock market, the properties, the commodities, the bonds, the venture capital, private equity. And I think all those markets are saturated. And I haven't even talked about the fact that all of those markets are over-indebted. We basically have a debt problem where all of those markets now, we used to create diversified portfolios because we were able to offset and create uncorrelated assets that as one would go up, one would go down, and it offset with bad performance. And when one would go up, the other would go down. And we'd be able to level out a better performing portfolio. The problem is nowadays that idea of diversification is completely broken because we have debt up to our eyeballs across every asset class, and now every asset class either moves up or down, subject to whether or not they're printing money or they're taking money out of the economy. And that is a very sad truth of it. And what's interesting is that when the money is going into the economy, Bitcoin is the best performing asset by a mile. And when they're taking money out of the economy, which they've done for the last 2 years, Bitcoin has actually been a really good performing asset. And this is something that a lot of the Bitcoiners were looking at thinking, is Bitcoin going to be able to survive when we move off a zero interest rate policy and they're actually taking money out of the economy? Now, this is one of the reasons why I'm really bullish about what's coming down the pipe, is that they've got to print a ton of money, they've got to roll over an enormous amount of debt. There's roughly $70 trillion of debt that needs to get rolled over every year, and the government has to print the difference. Now, where does the value accrual happen in that economic landscape of investment options that we have? Bitcoin is going to accrue faster on percentage terms relative to everything else because it's the smallest and it has the biggest bandwidth to adopt the most of it. And what most people don't really comprehend is that over time, Bitcoin can be as big, if not bigger, than the bond market, the stock market, the property market combined, because it's a better store of value than all three of them combined. And this is the really hard thing for a lot of people to really understand, that Bitcoin, so basically it's $1 trillion asset now. That could easily be a $1 quadrillion asset. It will go up 1,000 times from here in value. And, it wouldn't blink, it wouldn't change anything in the world that we've got in front of us right now. So the triple point asset is a unique concept, I think, that represents Bitcoin being the first asset that is the best at each of the three functions of money at the same time. And this is a really misunderstood thing from traditional economists, from traditional financial planners and investment advisors, is that they don't even understand what money is. So when you talk to them about this, literally the eyes glaze over and they're like, I don't know what you just said to me. Now, with the triple point asset, because it's the best at all three functions of money at the same time, we're going to have competitive tension from each of those use cases for getting Bitcoin. And this is where the exponentiality or the exponential upside or asymmetric bet to the upside of Bitcoin really, to me, is an absolute unknown as to what this can do. Because when you have competitive tension from three different forces pushing on one asset, what that looks like to me is basically it's going to be the equivalent of an elephant stepping on a tube of toothpaste and just sending toothpaste to the sky. It's just a matter of when, not if, everyone figures this out. And ironically, the first central bank to figure this out, that they can print money out of thin air to buy a hard asset that could never be recreated or reconstructed, regardless of how much money or printing you've got. All of a sudden, that is the asymmetrical trade from the central bankers that is going to, basically grab your popcorn, folks, because it's going to be an absolute show watching central banks compete with Bitcoin when they can't pry it out of your hands like they did with gold and the Executive Order 6102. To me, and this is probably the final thing I'll talk about, is Bitcoin is pristine collateral. If people understand that collateral is what creates value, if we look at the Australian property market or look at any of the property markets, because the credit was allowed on the residential property markets, they had an easing of credit policies. They used to, like in the 1970s, you used to borrow money on a home and they'd give you 50% of the value of the property in a loan, and you had to come up with 50%. Fast forward to today, and if you come up with 5% of the value of the property, they'll lend you 95%, plus they'll capitalise the mortgage insurance on top of it. So you end up borrowing 97% out of the 100% of the property that you're purchasing. All of a sudden, what does that do to property values? That sends them sky high. And the interesting thing for me with Bitcoin being pristine collateral is that the world doesn't understand that it's pristine collateral. And because it's perfect collateral, you don't have any counterparty risk. And because you don't have any counterparty risk, you don't have to do the normal checks and balances that when you're lending, you normally do. So normally you'd look at the borrower, you'd check their character, you'd look at their capacity to pay back. But because Bitcoin is perfect collateral, you don't have to concern yourself with any of that. And to me, once people understand what that is, they'll be lending on Bitcoin. And this is where probably one of the most important things I can talk about, just very briefly before I wrap, is that you need to start thinking about owning that Bitcoin personally, self-custodying it, because the options to borrow on that moving forward are going to save you from any tax consequences of selling. It's going to be better from an estate planning perspective, intergenerational wealth transfer. And most importantly, you're going to have lending options all across the globe for the first time ever. So me in Sydney, I'm limited with my residential property to go to one of the 4 banks in Australia. You being in Ireland, you've got a number of banks that you can go to. You certainly can't come to Australia with a residential title deed for an Irish property and say, hey, I'd like to borrow on a townhouse. That doesn't happen. But with Bitcoin, because it's globally ubiquitous, we'll be able to go to any bank on earth that offers us the best rate of interest on our Bitcoin, because it's the same the world over. And this is the first asset that you will be able to do this on a global basis. And this is where, when we're giving advice to clients, we're starting to think about how to best structure that in a way that lets us access those lending products that probably aren't here yet, but in the next sort of 5 to 10 years, when Bitcoin goes 100x from here, they will certainly be here. Every bank on earth will be offering it, and every bank on earth will be competing with it. And when that happens, the value of Bitcoin is going to go through the roof, because there's now a functioning credit market on the back of it. And the important thing to think about from that point of view is that you will never have to sell your Bitcoin, because you'll be able to effectively leverage it to get whatever you want from it anyway. And when we're talking to clients about, or families about intergenerational wealth, we don't want to be selling the best assets in the portfolio. We want to hold on to those forever, and this is where being globally ubiquitous pristine collateral in Bitcoin will allow us to avoid that mistake, and it will completely redefine what the future looks like for us. So if anything I've said has gone over your head, just look around at the smart people in the world and what they're doing. Larry Fink, head of BlackRock, he's doing it now, so if it's good enough for him, you do it too. That brings me to the end of the presentation, and I'll throw the room for any questions.
Okay, thanks.
Peter, if you just want to stop sharing your screen there, and we'll get you on the big screen.
I don't want to stop. I want to fuck you around like I did at the start.
Thanks, Tom. We get a few questions.
Yeah, 3 questions there. Okay, let's start down here. This lady.
Hi, Peter. On a call with the Retirement Club, you mentioned something about the banks that will pay us in future to store Bitcoin with them. Can you expand upon that, what that means, how that would work?
Sure. So, if you have, I'll give you the full rundown. So at the moment, there are 2 ways of thinking about Bitcoin. You have Nayib Bukele in El Salvador thinking about Bitcoin as a currency, and you have Michael Saylor pushing really hard as Bitcoin as property. The reason why we need to make those 2 distinctions is because when you borrow, you need to understand, are you lending as Bitcoin as currency or Bitcoin as property? If you're lending as Bitcoin as property, you're going to go to a HODL or a Levin type facility. You're going to put your Bitcoin up as collateral. You're going to ensure that it's not rehypothecated. You're going to get an interest rate of roughly somewhere between 12 and 20% on your Bitcoin, but it's going to be treated as property. And the important thing about treating it as property is that they cannot rehypothecate your Bitcoin. So you've removed one of the major concerns around borrowing on your Bitcoin, which is they're taking your Bitcoin, rehypothecating it, and they're going to blow up like a BlockFi or a Celsius or a Terralbird or whatever. Conversely, if you treat that as currency, you're going to put your Bitcoin into an account that's custodied by the banks. They're going to see that then as their asset. Once it's on their balance sheet with a banking license, the bank can use your collateral to create 20x the leverage on it, and then lend out 20x the loans. And so to give you some rough math on this, speaking to too many Americans, I forget I'm talking to the Irish, which is just like us, maths. If we have a $10 million Bitcoin, we put that on the balance sheet of the bank. They can leverage that 20x and create $200 million worth of loans. And they can lend that out to all their parties. Now, if they're creating $200 million of loans with their counterparties or their clients, they're going to be making roughly about $2 to $4 million per annum on that $10 million that you leave on their balance sheet. Now, if you go and borrow $1 million from them, they go and leverage that 20x and give it out to all of their clients. They make $2 to $4 million on it. My expectation is, because there's now global competition amongst banks, there's going to be a bank on earth that says, you know what, we're going to incentivize you to borrow money, so we're going to pay you part of our profits to borrow money from us. And that's how that's going to work.
And Peter, just to point out on that thing, when people take a loan, there's no tax on a loan. Yeah, correct?
Bingo. Yep.
A loan is a non-taxable event. And that's what wealthy people do. Rich people do that. They leverage their assets like that. Could you just talk a little bit about that, Peter, maybe?
Right. Without trying to terrify you, the governments are going to be overreaching and straight in your pocket trying to raise all sorts of ungodly taxes on us. And a way to get around that is to never sell your assets. And how the wealthy do that is what they do is they take their assets to the bank, they gear that up, they borrow on it, and then they go and spend that money. And because they never sell the asset, there's never a taxable event. And I might just sort of step back on this and talk about what's happening globally, because guess what? It's coming to you, it's coming to me. We're going to have to deal with this at some point in time, so we should start thinking about these things now. In Canada, we have just had their tax rate changed, and they now charge 66% capital gains tax on the sale of an asset. I would really like to use profanity here as to how egregious that is. However, just to give you an example, if you bought $100,000 worth of Bitcoin and it goes to $10 million, and you want to sell the $10 million and realise the cash out of that to go and spend because you want to pay down some debt or do whatever, you're going to walk away with $3.5 million and you're going to pay $6.5 million in tax. That is completely unacceptable, egregious tax grab. Now, all of a sudden, you can avoid that problem by going to a lender, putting your $10 million of Bitcoin up and saying, hey, I'd like a $5 million loan. Okay, here's your $5 million loan. I've now walked away with an extra $1.5 million. I don't have $6.5 million in tax payable. And if the lender blows up, now, not that I want it to, but if the lender were to blow up and lose everything and do a Celsius or a block fine, I'm still in a better position than I am in selling my Bitcoin and paying $6.5 million in tax and walking away with $3.5 million, because I now have a tax loss of $10 million and I've got my $5 million in cash from it and I haven't paid any taxes. So all of a sudden, and this is where it starts getting complicated with Bitcoin, is that I say to everyone, look, just don't borrow on your Bitcoin, it's too risky the rest of it. But if you're sitting on 100x or 1000x gain on your Bitcoin and you want to leverage it in some way to avoid a situation that we just talked about, all of a sudden, when you overlay the tax consequences of the investment decision or the borrowing decision that you make, to me that makes sense. I'd take that bet all day. All of a sudden, the fact of getting rubbed by your lender is not a major concern, because I'm going to get rubbed by my government and the amount of tax that I've got to pay. So sadly, this is the world that we need to be preparing for, because as our governments, well, as the appearance of how broke they are becomes clearer and clearer to the broader public, they are going to be overreaching into our pockets to try and garner more and more tax dollars from us. And one particularly disturbing situation which I'm absolutely filthy about in Australia is that we've got a situation where they are now charging on pension balances over $3 million. The year after next financial year, they are going to be charging unrealised capital gains on balances over $3 million of 30% per annum. And so if you've got $3 million in your super and Bitcoin has a cracker year and it goes from $3 million to $30 million, you've got a $27 million gain. You're going to have an $8.1 million tax bill to pay them on that 30% unrealised capital gains, meaning you haven't sold anything in the fund, but they're still going to charge you $8.1 million. And the little cherry on top to, the total fuck you from our government is that to sell down the $8 million that you've got to pay them, they're going to charge you capital gains tax on selling the $8 million to pay your tax bill, which is another $900,000 in tax that we've got to pay. So it's now a nice round $9 million that we've got to pay that financial year. So this is why what you're listening to now is so critical, because this encroachment and the taxes increasing are going to get worse and worse and worse. And there's really only one asset that you can avoid this stuff with, and that's Bitcoin.
So learn Bitcoin, people, quick. Do we have a question down here from the lady?
Yeah. Hi, Peter. Thank you for coming on today. I always like to listen to you. Maybe you've already answered this question, but you just mentioned about us lending our money, our Bitcoin, out to the banks and that. With what they've been doing with the fiat system, how can we have the confidence in handing our Bitcoin over? With us having, our safe phrase, how would that work? In what way could you explain that?
It's a case-by-case basis at the moment. I spend a lot of time looking at these lending options as we speak. So depending on what you're looking to do, how you're looking to do it, the time frame which you're looking to do, there's literally a range of options that will give you free money tomorrow if you borrow less than 15% of the Bitcoin that you put up as collateral, or you can go to a 60% lend where there's a multi-sig involved and there's no rehypothecation, and I'll charge you somewhere between 16 to 20% for that privilege. So it's really going to be a spectrum, and this to me is why Bitcoin being a globally ubiquitous asset is going to be a complete game changer, is because, I've never had the privilege of being able to, or maybe not privilege might be the wrong word, the dissatisfaction of having to deal with an Irish bank, and, from Australia anyway. And this is where, when you've got Bitcoin that's going to be the most sought after collateral, I'm going to have Irish banks courting me with all sorts of loan offers to come and put their Bitcoin with you, with your banks. And same is going to happen here. That's not happening at the moment, but I can tell you right now that if you want to go to Abra, which is a lender out of the US, and you've got, call it 7 Bitcoin, they'll loan you a full Bitcoin with a 0% interest rate up to $500,000. Sounds too good to be true, right? And there is risk with it. So I'm not endorsing that, but I'm just telling you that's the range of lending options that are available today. And now Abra is not a bank, which means Abra can't leverage your Bitcoin 20x to the masses and their clients. So what happens when the banks can leverage your Bitcoin? They're going to be paying you to borrow money.
But to just home in on that point there, Peter, a little bit, right? People right now, all them solutions are going to be coming maybe in 5, 6, 7 years' time. People need to get into a mindset of focusing and accumulating right now. Accumulate, learn about Bitcoin. Yeah, because this is going to change our lives, people. It's changed a lot of other people's lives here. And we've been just ahead of you. Peter's been well ahead of us. This change is coming. So just start focusing on getting to 1 Bitcoin, 2 Bitcoin, 5 Bitcoin, whatever, yeah?
That's the most important message that you can hear today. Basically, the game has changed. The financial game that I play with my clients now is one of Bitcoin accumulation. I don't even look at what their net assets are worth, because it's an arbitrary figure that gets debased every year with the money printer. But the game I do play with my clients is how much Bitcoin they've got, and then I try and basically play head games with them to say, hey, like I sent a message to a client 2 days ago, 2 months ago. He had just over 40 Bitcoin. I said, hey, I'm really upset with you. Something's just not right. And he's messaged me back, well, what are you talking about? What's going on? I said, just look at this number. And I sent him the number of his Bitcoin balance. I go, are you happy with that? Like, it doesn't sit right. Like, you really need to round that to 42. Like, get off your ass and buy another Bitcoin in a bit. He's like, okay, I'll do that. And literally, he did do that. And once it ticks over 42 and it goes to 42.02 or 3, I'm like, 03. Not much good.
Go to
now,
50.
That's a lot of money. That's it. So that's literally the next conversation. hey, we want to work you to 50. And you just play the accumulation game because that's the new game in your head you need to be playing. And this is a long-term game that we can all play and we can all win. And this is the ironic thing. The fiat game has winners and losers, and the Bitcoin game, everyone can win. All you need to do is have more Bitcoin in a year from now than you do now.
Perfect. Okay, another question here from this gentleman.
Thanks very much, Peter. Question I have is, if you have money in a traditional pension or company director's pension that's already invested, what would be the best way to move that to a product that tracks Bitcoin?
Are you allowed to invest in MicroStrategy?
It is quite hard though here for Irish pensions. People have pensions already, you know, because they're not allowing it. You know, they know what's coming. Yeah. So probably the best thing to do is just start accumulating Bitcoin just yourself. Yeah.
Join the Retire Early Club because we've been expert in that.
I couldn't agree more. And interestingly, to your point on that, I am now redefining our advice to our clients in Australia or even the US. Do not invest in the pension because we don't know what the rules are going to be around the taxation. And so for me, I'm 46 years old. I've got another 14 years of investment and life to get through before I can actually access that money in my pension. But the arseholes that are the government are going to be taxing me 30% unrealised capital gains per year on my Bitcoin balance in my super fund. So God knows what that's going to end up with by the time I get to 60. And the really shitty thing is, I can't access that before I'm 60. So it's got to sit in there, get taxed at absolute buggery. And then when I turn 60, I can take it out. So avoid, basically just get as much Bitcoin outside of, the traditional pension system as you can, because you really want as much control as possible, is my view. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Another question here.
Hey, Peter, thanks again for today. Just with regards to borrowing against if you have a Bitcoin portfolio, you get to retirement age and you've no more income coming in outside of, say, the Bitcoin that you've saved over the years. Instead of selling Bitcoin, you leverage to the bank and you take a loan from the bank. If that's your only source of income when you take the loan, how do you ultimately pay back the principal to the bank that you borrow if you have no other source of income other than the loan that you've made from the bank?
You
just keep rolling it.
Yeah, you just keep rolling it. You don't ever have to pay it back because the bank's got your collateral. And here's the ironic thing, right, about what's going to happen. And this is my full crazy on display here for you. But I'm trying to get my clients to think about borrowing on their Bitcoin in the next, call it 10 years. I think one Bitcoin will be $10 million a coin by 2030, and you'll be able to go to any bank on earth, they'll give you that money. They'll give you 10%. I wouldn't borrow more than 10% on that, but take 10% from them, borrow $1 million. They're going to pay you to borrow money on that. But the best part is 4 years' time from then, whatever the term that you've got with the bank is, your Bitcoin's going to go from 10 million to 100 million. The bank's going to turn around and go, we really like holding your collateral. Would you like another $40 million or $20 million? Like whatever you've got to get, like whatever they've got to pay you to keep onto that Bitcoin. Can we pay you $20 million? And we'll pay you 5% per annum just to borrow from us. All of a sudden, they're the things that are going to come down because this collateral is so important to the banking system moving forward. They just don't know it.
So would you ever make any repayments at all then, if that was the case? Because I presume with a loan, you'd be paying it back monthly. So they would just give you the money and then in 4 years' time, you just go back and get more money.
That's how it works.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, but Peter, just to point out,
I'm not so sure.
People don't understand what's about to happen with this asset. These institutions and these central banks, like at the moment, there's about 1.5 million coins on the exchanges. So when you're seeing the price of like 60 odd K, all these institutions are coming after 1.5 million units. How many companies are in the world, Peter? How many people are in the world? How many corporations in the world? Institutions. They just ain't enough for everybody to go around.
I agree with that. And, you just look at the market dynamics, just do simple supply and demand, and it's Econ 101 to figure out that this is coming. Now, I know the room thinks I'm crazy with what I just said, but I can tell you, I know someone personally who's been doing that already for 4 years. He just does it in DeFi with a wrapped Bitcoin. And I had a look at basically their setup, and They had borrowed in the last, call it 4 years, they borrowed $220,000 US. And what's interesting is they've got a rate on that money at somewhere between 10 and 16%. But there was a little ticker to the side of it which showed them how much their Bitcoin is worth by not selling. So they've racked up $200,000 in debt, but the Bitcoin they didn't sell is worth $400,000. And all that happens is that interest accumulates on the loan and grows the loan from 200 to 300 to 400. But Bitcoin's outpacing that cost of interest exponentially. So they're never going to have to worry about paying it back, and the lender's happy to keep lending them more money because that's how they make money. So yeah, that's how it works.
Yeah, hi Peter there. Just a question there, and I'm trying to get my head around all this, and I think I'll understand a bit of it, okay? But are you still saying that in 10, 20, 30 years' time, there will be fiat currencies and that the banks will be borrowing against your Bitcoin with fiat and lending out fiat to other people? Or is there a danger that there may be like paper, the equivalent of paper Bitcoin, where they're sort of actually creating false Bitcoin that is not really Bitcoin, that they are lending out to other people, like what has happened with gold, if you like? So that there's real gold, and then there's paper gold, which kind of basically adds leverage to the whole gold market and suppresses the price. Is there a danger of that happening, or what do you think?
No, I don't think there is. There is an initial concern with it, and you think through it, but with decentralized exchanges, moving away from centralized exchanges, which is, the bullshit is the TradFi that we're familiar with. Just think about this, actually. This really irks me. The gold market has basically been cornered by JP Morgan. They get a slap on the wrist, they get fined a couple of $1 billion every few years because they're basically market manipulation and they've fucked over all of their clients. Pardon the French, I'm sorry, it's late here. They get a fine every couple of years, basically rap on the knuckles, but they've still got their license. If the US government was serious about, hey, we're going to discourage all of this bad behaviour and we're going to make sure that you never do this again, they'd just take their license away. But the government's complicit in it, and it's a revenue stream for them. And this is where, mark my words on this, and maybe in the next few years have it back in and we can see how well this prediction goes, but CZ from Finance basically got a $4 billion fine, 4 months in jail, and now he's off. Once he gets through that, he's off. But mark my words, the SEC is going to give him a rap on the knuckles. Every few years, they're just going to milk him for another couple of $1 billion, and this is their new cash cow. So this is how it works. But as long as Bitcoin is self-custody, and this is the most important thing that you can do, if you're focused on number go up, and you want number to go up, get your coins off the exchange, see Dinny about how to do it, and this is where that is the single most important thing you can do to make sure that there's a crisis of supply, is make sure that your Bitcoin isn't on an exchange and you don't fall victim to a Celsius or a FTX type scam.
Okay, lovely. We've got one more question for you, Peter, and we've got a room full of hungry people here who are ready for their lunch. So we'll just pass it
Probably
over.
thirsty too.
We do 2 questions, okay?
Thanks. I'll be quick. Great presentation, Peter. Thanks for that. Can I just ask you to expand on the portfolio? I appreciate you mentioned the NASDAQ there and obviously Bitcoin, but what your thoughts are on including Bitcoin proxies as part of a portfolio? So I'm thinking the likes of MicroStrategy and some of the leading Bitcoin miners, and what percentage allocation you might think we should look to?
Not financial advice, but if you can't buy the underlying, as in Bitcoin, then I want exposure to a MicroStrategy. I don't think you can get exposure to an ETF there, so MicroStrategy is as good as you're going to do. For me, there's going to be a volatile upside with the Bitcoin mining stocks. A couple of Bitcoin miners I know really well out of Australia, Dan and Will Roberts are good mates of mine. But mining is a really hard business. It's volatile, it's capital intensive, and it's arguably the greatest competition on earth. It's a business I don't like long term because you're going to have nation states come in and use this as basically a critical piece of infrastructure. They're going to give away free energy. Energy represents 80% of the cost, variable cost of mining Bitcoin. And when nation states start giving away their energy for free, that business is over from a business perspective. So I think I want to own MicroStrategy, but I want to own as much Bitcoin as possible, because Bitcoin is going to give you ultimate optionality. And that's the most critical thing as times become really volatile.
Okay, thanks a lot, Peter, okay? Really appreciate your
Guys,
time.
can we have a round of applause for Peter, please?
Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Thanks very much, Peter, for your time. That was awesome.
Cheers, Vinny. Have a great
Guys,
day,
we've
guys.
pushed all the tables together for lunch, so you'll be forced to talk to strangers. That's
Yeah,
okay. You've something in common. You like Bitcoin, so start the conversation with Bitcoin. We'll see you at lunch. Back here for 2 o'clock?
2 o'clock, yeah.
Boom.
Thanks a lot, Peter. See you. Bye.
Cheers, Peter. Thanks, man.
Cheers.
Awesome stuff.
Bye. Good to see you. Thank you.
What's that, the vibrations? What do they do? Right, I don't know that. Yeah, yeah. Brilliant. How are you feeling? Good? Brilliant. I'll talk to you at lunch, kid. Sorry, I'm just trying to sort this out. Yeah, man. Theo. You talking next? Lavender. It's not like the smell, so I think I've got lavender like roll on. Yo. I don't think it's not really that smelly. I don't think usually smell it from there. Yeah. Paul there will do it. Paul, any chance we can open some windows? They want to clear the energy. Yeah. Good idea, let some fresh air in. Yeah, that'd be great. No problem. It's a good idea.